collective excitement at space. That is a wonderful thing. But at the same time, I know everyone's calendar is tight, so since we now have a quorum, we will gavel in. Good morning. And we are going to start with a markup briefly, and then we will move to the hearing. The Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation will come to order. Today, we will consider the nomination of Ariel Roth to lead the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA. Ariel is an exceptional candidate for this position, and if I may say so, an exceptional person. Ariel is currently serving as my policy director for telecommunications on this committee. As I've directly observed, Ariel knows telecommunications law and policy as well as anyone else in this town. She has served as the wireline advisor to former FCC Commissioner Michael O'Reilly, as a detailee to the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and here in the Senate as legislative counsel to former Senator and committee member Roy Blunt. She'll bring energy and enthusiasm to NTIA, where she will pursue a win-win solution on spectrum that addresses both commercial and national security concerns. Now, I know the question many of you are wondering, has the baby come? And the answer is yes. As of 12:10 a.m., Ariel gave birth to a beautiful baby girl who is 7 pounds, 10 ounces, and she joins her 3 sisters and 2 brothers. I have to commend Ariel's timing of giving birth on the day of the voting committee on her confirmation.
Congratulations, Sarah.
I don't know if her daughter has been named yet, but I am sure that little Bede will be a beautiful young girl. And I'm going to get in trouble with Ariel for that one. During her confirmation hearing, Ariel promised to administer the BEAD program, quote, to the benefit of the American people, not to any single individual or company. BEAD desperately needs a revamp. The program has yet to connect a single American to high-speed internet after 1,241 days. A major barrier is its laborious 14-step process, which writer Ezra Klein painstakingly outlined to a nonplussed Jon Stewart the other week. To quote Jon Stewart, "I'm speechless, Ezra. Honestly, it's far worse than I could have imagined." Here's something I don't say often. I agree with Jon Stewart. Ariel fully understands these challenges and knows what it takes to finish the job. That's why she has the backing of dozens of stakeholders from across the country. To my Democrat colleagues, while I understand you may have strenuous objections to the overall direction of the Trump administration, you should know that Ariel is thoughtful, honest, and as receptive to the concerns of your side of the aisle as any nominee will have before us. We all know the importance of knowing a person in the executive branch whom we can call on and trust to listen to our views. So on the day of the birth of her 6th child, I hope that you will join me in supporting Ariel in a strong bipartisan showing in her home committee. I now turn to Ranking Member Cantwell for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for making that wonderful announcement about Ariel and her family. It was a delight to have her and her husband and her children in the audience. Probably one of the most delightful moments that the committee has had in watching them, and we certainly congratulate her and her family. And I also, too, want to recognize the astronauts that I'm sure you will probably recognize later, but Reed Weissman, Victor Glover, Christina Cox, and Jeremy Hansen of the Artemis team that are here. Thank you so much. We're very proud of you. Thank you. We're very proud of, in the state of Washington, Commander Ann McClain, who is leading the Crew 10 expedition right now. And so you're all nodding, so you all know her. And it just is amazing what you're all doing. And so we look forward to this hearing with Mr. Isaacman and Ms. Trusty. But let me address the Roth nomination this morning for Secretary of Communications and Information at the Department of Commerce. When Ms. Roth was before the committee and gave opening remarks, I did think that we would get more of an NTI commitment on critical issues for U.S. leadership and for interagency wrangling, because interagency wrangling is definitely a big part of NTIA's mission to get us a clear spectrum policy. Unfortunately, at the hearing, I didn't hear a commitment explicitly or even theoretically to the investments that this committee has already made. I know this is probably a frustration to many of my colleagues, but this is what we're asking of nominees throughout the Congress now, because we have a very clear idea about what is getting cut. I have long advocated for a more evidence-based approach to our spectrum management policy. The first Trump administration rushed to bring spectrum to the commercial market, I believe, without some of the studies and interagency coordination. And this approach put federal capabilities at risk: aviation safety when aircraft altimeters and 5G interfered with one another, weather forecasting when 5G deployment interfered with 24 gigahertz band detections of water droplets, GPS systems, vehicle safety, and our military's readiness and capabilities. So I believe the next NTIA administrator must not repeat those avoidable mistakes of the past. The commercial value of spectrum is its ability to offset the tax cuts for the complexities of the system, but also it's critical that we safeguard our national security. Beyond domestic concerns, America's leadership in spectrum is key to protecting our national security, our ability to innovate. So to maintain that position in the world's cutting-edge technology, we need a fully coordinated national strategy that balances our domestic priorities and projects, our U.S. leadership in the International World Radio Conference and the Telecommunications Union. So while I agree we need to bring more spectrum to market, independent studies need to be completed so that we have the full understanding of the potential impacts to our national security and public safety. Ms. Roth was not clear about this, or whether she would wait for the results of an ongoing evidence-based spectrum ban with critical national security and public safety issues before making those decisions on spectrum reallocation. Specifically, when I asked Ms. Roth about repeating the process for ongoing studies of the lower 3G, 7, and 8 gigahertz bands that have been heavily discussed and debated in recent years, she did not commit. And so I am concerned about these national security issues. Spectrum management is just one of the issues where I felt like we could have had more clarity. Obviously, Mr. Chairman, you're bringing up the federal grant programs under NTIA, asked by many of the committee members about preserving the $42 billion lawfully allocated to states, tribes, and territories under the BEAD program, which Congress enacted to connect all unserved and underserved households to the affordable, reliability, high-speed access. Ms. Roth refused to commit to honor the agreements that NTIA has already made with states and tribes. So these are great concerns on the investments that our Congress has already decided. She had the opportunity to continue to answer those questions. For the record, we do not see the evidence of that commitment. I also, on the issue of Elon Musk and conflicts of interest and making sure that even potential conflicts of interest were clear, I also have concerns. So, Mr. Chairman, at this point in time, I cannot support Ms. Roth's nomination to be the director of NTIA.
I recognize Senator Wicker for a motion.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me just add a comment or two to the announcement that you made. The chairman said that Ariel had given birth to a beautiful baby girl. He knows what he's talking about. He's got a picture up here, and actually on the first morning of her life, she flashed a nice big smile, and he's got that to prove. Also, in an effort to wait until the day of her vote here in committee, Ariel saved that final push till 10 minutes after midnight. And So her timing is impeccable. Based on that and other reasons, I move that PN 2225, nomination of Ariel Roth to be Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information be favorably reported.
Is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion?
Roll call, please.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Thune.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Wicker.
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher. Aye. Mr. Moran. Aye. Mr. Sullivan. Aye. Mrs. Blackburn. Aye. Mr. Young. Aye. Mr. Budd. Aye. Mr. Schmidt. Aye. Mr. Curtis. Aye. Mr. Moreno. Aye. Mr. Sheehy. Aye. Mrs. Capito. Aye. Ms. Lummis. Aye. Ms. Cantwell.
No.
Ms. Klobuchar.
No by proxy.
Mr. Schatz.
No by proxy.
Mr. Markey.
No by proxy.
Mr. Peters.
No.
Ms. Baldwin. No. Ms. Duckworth.
No by proxy.
Ms. Rosen. No. Mr. Lujan. No. Mr. Hickenlooper.
No by proxy.
Mr. Fetterman.
No by proxy.
Mr. Kim.
No.
Ms. Blunt Rochester.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cruz.
Aye.
The yeses are 15, the nos are 13.
The motion is agreed to, and the nomination is ordered to be favorably reported. I will now recognize any members of the committee wishing to make any remarks. That concludes our markup, and we will now move in to our hearing. Today we will hear from Jared Isaacman, who has been nominated to lead the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, and from Olivia Trusty, who has been nominated to the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. NASA has always been at the forefront of American leadership. In 1969, that meant putting a man on the moon. Today, it means returning there, this time to stay. Our nominee, Jared Isaacman, has been active in the commercialization of space exploration. In 2021, Mr. Isaacman commanded the first all-civilian spaceflight, Inspiration 4. In 2024, he flew his second commercial mission, going further into space than any other manned mission since Apollo 17. He brings a unique perspective to the challenges facing NASA and the space industry. Today, NASA is at a crossroads. The explosive growth of the commercial space sector, from hardware manufacturers to space tourism ventures, has transformed the celestial and economic landscape. Space is no longer the exclusive domain of sovereign nations and a handful of legacy defense contractors. The democratization of space has spurred growth, reduced launch and satellite costs, and fostered the curiosity of the next generation. At the same time, the future of the final frontier has never been more uncertain. In military terms, space is the ultimate high ground. A nation that dominates in space can deprive others not only of intelligence capabilities, but modern conveniences like GPS and satellite internet. And make no mistake, the Chinese Communist Party has been explicit in its desire to dominate space, putting a fully functional space station in low Earth orbit and robotic rovers on the far side of the moon. We are not headed for the next space race. It is already here. President Trump alluded to this race in his inaugural address when he envisioned American astronauts on Mars. I strongly support the president's vision. In fact, my 2017 NASA Authorization Act was one of the very first pieces of legislation President Trump signed in his first term, and it explicitly enshrined this goal in law. But the pursuit of the next horizon cannot mean abandoning American dominance where it is already established. The International Space Station has been continuously manned for more than 20 years, serving as a hub for research and testing together with our international partners in space exploration. While we will eventually have to retire the ISS, before that happens, we must put the necessary systems in place to support and command American astronauts continually in low Earth orbit. We cannot surrender low Earth orbit to the Chinese or to the Russians. Likewise, the Artemis mission, launched during President Trump's first term, is set to return American astronauts to the moon and establish a sustained human presence there. Joining us in the audience today, as we heard earlier this morning, are the 4 Artemis II astronauts: Reed Weissman, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Jeremy Hansen. In the next year, they will fly to and orbit the moon, setting the course for Artemis III's return to the lunar surface in 2027. The Artemis missions and the entire Moon to Mars program, which have enjoyed consistent bipartisan support, serve as a stepping stone to landing American astronauts on Mars. In fact, this stepping stone approach is explicitly in the law as enacted by Congress. We must stay the course. An extreme shift in priorities at this stage would almost certainly mean a red moon, ceding ground to China for generations to come. I am hard-pressed to think of a more catastrophic mistake we could make in space than saying to communist China, the moon is yours, America will not lead. So I look forward to hearing from Mr. Isaacman about his goals for NASA, his commitment to Artemis, how he intends to refocus and reinvigorate the agency in its core mission, and how he will ensure America continues to lead the world in space exploration. Let me now turn to the Federal Communications Commission, which faces its own set of challenges. The agency's Universal Service Fund was recently challenged in the Supreme Court. Its broadcast ownership rules are ill-adapted to the modern media environment. And most significantly, in March of 2023, the FCC lost its authority to conduct spectrum auctions for the first time ever. This ongoing lapse in auction authority has cost jobs and has weakened America's global standing. Increasing the amount of spectrum available for commercial use will secure our preeminence in telecommunications and will unlock billions of dollars for domestic investment, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs. Olivia Trusty has nearly 20 years of relevant experience in telecommunications. She is currently a staff member at the Armed Services Committee, which is chaired by our colleague, Senator Wicker, who will be introducing her this morning. Ms. Trusty has also worked as a policy director here at the Commerce Committee, giving her a well-rounded views of the interest of both the Department of Defense and the commercial industry when it comes to mid-band spectrum. I am confident that Ms. Trusty will be an asset at the FCC, where she will champion a spectrum pipeline, protect free speech, and ensure access to fast and affordable internet. I look forward to hearing from both of today's nominees and learning how they hope to advance American greatness within their institutions. I now turn to Ranking Member Cantwell for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to our two nominees, Mr. Isaacman and Ms. Trusty. Congratulations on this nomination. Mr. Isaacman, obviously for NASA, and Ms. Trusty for the Federal Communications Agency. First, Mr. Isaacman, nominee for the Administrator of NASA. As my colleague was just saying, the space race is heating up. You will have a critical task of delivering mission-critical, on-time, and on-budget challenges for the United States of America over the next 4 years to make sure that we don't lose in that space race. This includes successful execution on the Artemis program, which will take the United States back to the moon and ultimately the goal of getting to Mars. The NASA authorization bill, which Senator Cruz and I co-sponsored, strongly backs the Artemis program. It includes a lunar lander, redundancy, NASA's Space Launch SLS system, and critical to America's leadership in space, getting Americans back to the moon. The state of Washington has long been a home to aviation, but now with over 40 companies across the state of Washington producing space-related products, we have over 2,000 employees working just on the Artemis program. So we're invested. These companies supply components for the Gateway Space Station, the Orion crew capsule, the 2 crewed lunar landers, the SLS heavy lift rocket, and its ground system. Beyond space exploration, NASA is also one of the world's top R&D organizations. We had a chance to talk about that in my office, about NASA's discoveries and science that are helping us with our aerospace industry overall. NASA scientists and engineers provide the crucial evidence and information to both government and industry on issues like AI, quantum, advanced aerospace materials, and next-generation manufacturing. So I know a consortium in my state, standing up a tech hub, has been an applicant that NASA has been very supportive of. I do have concerns as we move forward about reports in the press about where the administration will come down on investments. I hope we can talk about this today and clarify your position as it relates to these priorities for our nation. For example, in March of last month, the Wall Street Journal reported that the Trump administration was considering major changes to the Artemis program. You too have also made past statements about changes to the program. And if NASA does terminate the SLS and relies only on commercial rockets, such as SpaceX and Blue Origin New Glenn, experts say Americans won't get to the moon before the end of the decade. So a lot of scientific analysis resting on your shoulders, and then the budget capabilities to convince our colleagues to make these investments. Like the chairman, I want to win the race. I want to make sure that China doesn't beat us to Mars, and I hope that even with this recent announcements of theirs, that we beat them to the moon. I strongly believe that safety and resiliency, built through redundancy and innovation, through competition, is a key. So I would like to hear your views on that this morning. We're also seeing the administration and DOGE specifically cancel research grants to fund science agency and lay off highly skilled technical experts across the federal government. According to the news reports, NASA has confirmed an announcement by DOGE that up to $420 million in agency contracts have been canceled. So this is of a concern, sorting out how this cancellation impacts many different organizations. Meanwhile, tomorrow is the last day of work for several top NASA advisors, including the chief economist, the chief scientist, and the chief technologist. Their positions were eliminated because of the DOGE agenda. Reports indicate that the FY 2026 budget request might slash NASA's science funding by half. So, Mr. Isaacman, all of these are in the news, and we will want to understand your commitment to these issues or understanding your strategy about how you see us making these commitments to invest in science for the future. Now to Ms. Trusty. Certainly welcome to you and your family who is here. I think you definitely outnumber the astronauts in the room, which is, we very much appreciate that. It's good to have that support, and your nomination comes at a critical time for the FCC. We want to have a communication system that is admired by the world, and we know that you're no stranger to this issue, working very diligently for Senator Wicker, both here on this committee and now on the Armed Services Committee. The FCC plays a vital role in spectrum policy management and commercial airwaves, and I've long advocated, as I said in my earlier statement, for an evidence-based system. And during the first Trump administration, the rush to auction, I think, raised some concerns, and most notably, they sold the C-band without proper FAA coordination about the impacts of aircraft altimeters, creating an unnecessary problem that almost caused flights to be grounded and slowed down the implementation of 5G. So I hope we'll hear about that issue, how you see us getting a more balanced approach in communication. Because of the FCC's influence over some of our most important institutions, including the media and the internet and providers, the FCC is an independent agency not subject to direct presidential control, but this tradition is under attack. The Trump administration is seeking to bring independent agencies like the FCC under the president's direct control. Recently, the president fired 2 Democratic commissioners at the Independent Federal Trade Commission without cause. So let me be clear, removing independent commissioners based on their party affiliation sets a dangerous precedent. I expect this administration will maintain a fully FCC staff with 5 commissioners, including 2 Democrats. And meanwhile, the Trump administration FCC chair has launched a series of investigations into media companies that the president doesn't like. So I was very happy to see this recent decision on holding up the AP. Very important to have a very, very competitive landscape when it comes to media and news production. The FCC should return to its longstanding role as a neutral, independent regulator, and so look forward to asking you questions about that as well today. But again, congratulations on your nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and in a moment I will recognize Senator Wicker, but I do want to note, in addition to the 4 Artemis II astronauts who are here, we actually have a total of 10 astronauts in the room. We have 6 more. We have the astronauts of Polaris Dawn, Scott Poteet, Sarah Gillis, and Anna Menon. And we have the astronauts of Inspiration 4, Haley Arsenault, Chris Zembrowski, and Dr. Cian Proctor. And so to the 6 of you as well, thank you for your service and welcome. And I have to say, anytime you have 10 astronauts in the room, this may be the most badass assemblage at a commerce hearing that I've seen. And with that, I recognize Senator Wicker to make an introduction.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, thank you for introducing all of our astronauts. And as you can see, Senator Fisher and I engaged in a little hero worship before you hit the gavel and started this. But I am absolutely delighted to introduce and recommend to the committee and to the Senate Olivia Trusty as the next member of the FCC. I'm unqualified, actually, to tell what a great nominee she is. And also, I hope there's some work being done back at my office. We have a number of staffers who slipped away, and I think there are probably a number of people watching on the telephone. But I'm profoundly appreciative for this honor and appreciative to President Trump for making this nomination. I frankly cannot conceive of a more qualified nominee. Olivia Trusty performs work at the highest level of excellence, and she does it for the right reasons. And for 7 years now, I've been the beneficiary of her expertise. But frankly, this committee and the Armed Services Committee and the full Senate have also been the beneficiary of her expertise. When I became chairman of the Commerce Committee, I was fortunate that Olivia agreed to join my committee staff. A few years later, I became ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, and I knew there was one member of this committee staff that I wanted to bring over to handle her portfolio there. Olivia Trusty has helped all of us advance initiatives that made America more connected and more secure, initiatives that fall squarely within the Federal Communication Commission's jurisdiction. On technology party, she's helped us pass legislation to improve maps. She's worked to ensure broadband funds are directed where they're most needed and where Congress intended them to be. She's brought us closer to getting more Americans connected to high-speed internet. And of course, we're not quite where we need to be. I think she will help us in this new position get there quicker. Her work has contributed to national security. She was instrumental in advancing legislation to free our domestic networks from communications equipment manufactured by foreign adversaries. She's been a leader on spectrum policy, an area that bridges both technology and national security. She has collaborated with members and staff across the Commerce and Armed Services Committees to find common ground between commercial and federal interest. Olivia Trusty wants to help our country maintain our leadership without risking national security, and she's worked to make that happen. I could go on and on, but Olivia does like brevity. She chooses her words carefully and concisely. Let me just say, she plays chess, not checkers. She sees around the corners. She shoots straight, and she will shoot straight with members of this committee and the Senate. She uses common sense and adherence to the law, and she will do so as a commissioner. On a personal basis, she's serious about her faith. She's an NCAA gymnast at UNC Chapel Hill. She's a Mormon Republican from Maryland, for heaven's sake. And those of us who know her know that that she'll do a magnificent job. And actually, we're fortunate that she's chosen to work in the public sector for the taxpayers, and I could not give a more resounding endorsement to her nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I will say that is very impressive, particularly that she plays chess and not checkers and shoots straight. I will say shooting is a novel strategy in chess, but whatever works and gives you the checkmate. There's more than one way to defeat the king. And with that, I recognize the junior senator from Montana, Senator Sheehy, to introduce Mr. Isaacman.
Had to put junior in front of it, didn't you, Ted? For nearly 70 years,
I'm still the junior senator from Texas.
That's
this place, that could stick around a long time.
I am the longest-serving junior member. So, yeah, 24 years, you could still be the junior member. I wear it with a badge of honor. Okay.
Well, thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member. For nearly 70 years, the United States has been at the forefront of space exploration. President Trump knows how critical it is for our country to lead the way yet again as our space program aims to reach new heights, and that's why he chose exactly the right man for the job, Jared Isaacman. I've personally known Jared for several years, sharing an aviation community in Montana and cooperating with him on improving the education experience for our next generation of explorers, astronauts, engineers, and pilots who attend space camp at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. Of note, both Jared and I attended space camp an arduous 5-day program for small children. And I would say it lit a spark in both of us to chase the dream of aviation and aerospace. We both dreamed of being astronauts as children. The difference is Jared actually is one, whereas I had to settle for the decidedly less cool title of senator. America has been the leader of global space travel for generations, pushing the boundaries of science and testing the limits of human endurance and intellect. All Americans should be deeply proud of the incredible accomplishments of heroes like Alan Shepard, John Glenn, Neil Armstrong, Jim Lovell, and many others. The sacrifice and leadership of these brave astronauts is what most Americans know well. What they usually don't know is that behind each and every one of these heroes, many of whom sitting in front of us, is a massive team of dedicated engineers, program managers, innovators, test pilots, welders, electricians, truck drivers, and families who are the true heroes of our space program. To lead this incredible team requires a leader who not only understands and believes in the mission, but also has the interdisciplinary skill sets to coordinate these cross-functional teams to achieve critical outcomes. As we have unfortunately seen in recent days, NASA is struggling. And what's worse, it has been struggling for the past couple of decades. Since the tragedy of the Columbia disaster in 2003, which I remember like it was yesterday as I was preparing to enter the pool for a high school swim meet, NASA has been a struggling organization full of great people, searching for revival. For 10 years, the United States of America was paying the Russian government taxi fare to send our own astronauts into space. This would make JFK and Ronald Reagan turn in their graves. And in light of the recent Starliner mission to the ISS that left astronauts stuck in space for 9 months, we are reminded that much work still remains. President Trump, and Elon Musk, who's one of our greatest space entrepreneurs, both knew it was time for a change. And enter Jared Isaacman. Despite his childhood desire to be an Air Force pilot and an astronaut, Jared found out that he was smarter than most and started a disruptive software company in his garage as a teenager. That company grew to be a tremendous multi-billion-dollar success, and that success fueled his ascension into the Hall of Fame as a record-setting jet pilot, an aggressive fighter pilot for our Air Force, combat pilots, and most recently, the first civilian astronaut to ever conduct a spacewalk. On top of all that, Jared and I share another passion: pediatric philanthropy. Jared has personally donated millions of dollars to improve healthcare for at-risk children all over America, a cause which brought us together. NASA is at a point of great pride for a generation. It represents a moral obligation for us to continue to lead in the greatest frontier ever known, and it deserves strong leadership. Jared is an articulate leader, a great father and husband, and one of the smartest people in America. Jared understands not only how to manage complex multi-billion-dollar organizations, but also how to design and engineer critical systems. And to top it all off, he knows how to fly spaceships. America has given us a mandate to push the boundaries of outer space, and NASA is in need of spiritual and organizational rejuvenation, and that will take fresh, bold leadership. Jared is the perfect man for the job, and I look forward to adding NASA administrator to his already remarkable resume. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Isaacman for his opening statement.
Thank you, and Senator Sheehy for the very generous introduction. Thank you, Chairman Cruz, Ranking Member Cantwell, distinguished members of the committee. I'm honored and very grateful to be here before you today as President Donald Trump's nominee to lead the National Aeronautic and Space Administration. I have lived the American dream, and I owe this nation a great debt. I would happily serve President Trump in any capacity, but to work alongside the people that have expanded the boundaries of exploration and brought humanity closer to the stars would be the privilege of a lifetime. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge my crewmates, as you did earlier, Senator, along with my wife, Monica, and my 2 wonderful daughters that are sitting behind me, Mila and Liv. I do recognize I am a newcomer, so I thought I would share a bit about my story, along with my understanding of the challenges and the opportunities that lie ahead. I am an entrepreneur, and my journey began when I took a risk and left school at age 16 to build a company in my parents' basement. Despite my unconventional start, I found success very early in life and led my company into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that employs thousands. I'm a pilot with an aeronautics degree. Over the last 20 years, I've flown over 7,000 hours in jets and ex-military aircraft, setting world records and performing in air shows. My passion for aviation also led me to start another company, this time a defense aerospace business. As a company, we operated the world's largest private air force. Our job was to fly fighter jets as adversaries, executing enemy tactics and training American warfighters. We managed hundreds of millions in defense contracts and saved taxpayers billions along the way. I'm also an astronaut. Alongside a talented team, I led 2 record-breaking missions to space. On my last mission, we tested a new spacesuit while performing a spacewalk and orbited farther away from Earth than any human has gone since the last time Americans walked on the moon. Along the way, my 2 crewmates, Sarah Gillis and Anna Menon, became the women who've journeyed farthest from Earth ever. I'm an advocate for science. During these missions to space, my crew and I performed approximately 50 science and research experiments. I've also publicly supported the Chandra X-ray Observatory and offered to fund a mission to extend the life and capabilities of the Hubble Space Telescope. I care about the people back at home and our collective future here on Earth. My space career did not burden the taxpayers. They were privately funded and aimed at inspiring and helping people all over the world. One example is the over $250 million we raised to support St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and their critical work to ensure no child dies in the dawn of life. Alongside these efforts, I personally donated hundreds of millions of dollars to charitable endeavors. I share all of this because I am not a typical nominee for this position. I've been relatively apolitical. I am not a scientist. I never worked at NASA. I do not think these are weaknesses. In fact, I believe President Trump found them to be strengths. And if confirmed, I will bring all my experience to the greatest adventure in human history, the quest to discover the secrets of the universe. On that note, NASA is the most accomplished and respected space agency in the world, but for all NASA's historic achievements, the agency is not without challenges. Presidents have called for a return to the moon and a path to Mars since 1989, and well over $100 billion has been spent without the intended results. Most programs, new telescopes, rovers, X-planes, entire spaceships, are over budget and behind schedule. And this is discouraging because when people look up at the stars and wonder what is out there, they want those answers today and not decades down the road. And I know it is not lost on members of this committee that we have geopolitical rivals moving at impressive speeds. It's imperative for our national security, our pride, and all that we stand to gain in exploration that we never come in second place. If confirmed, and with the support and guidance of President Trump and members of Congress, we will reinvigorate a mission-first culture at NASA with the following objectives. First, American astronauts will lead the way in the ultimate high ground of space. As the President stated, we will prioritize sending American astronauts to Mars, and along the way, we will inevitably have the capabilities to return to the moon and determine the scientific, economic, and national security benefits for maintaining a presence on the lunar surface. We will focus our technology development efforts on the world's greatest engineering challenges, such as the practical application of nuclear propulsion, so we can truly unlock humankind's ability to explore among the stars. Second, we will ignite a thriving space economy in low Earth orbit. By working alongside international partners and industry, we can unlock the true economic potential of space and deliver meaningful benefits to the American people, potentially even charting a course for NASA to become a financially self-sustaining agency. Number 3, NASA will be a force multiplier for science. We will leverage NASA's scientific talent and capabilities to enable academic institutions and industry to increase the rate of world-changing discoveries. We will launch more telescopes, more probes, more rovers, and endeavor to better understand our planet and the universe beyond. If confirmed, I will work alongside and recruit the most talented minds this nation has to offer, and we will concentrate our resources towards achieving the near impossible, the objectives that no other agency, company, or institution is capable of accomplishing. We will do so, knowing the risks and the groundbreaking opportunities that lie ahead, because some risks, like exploring the worlds beyond ours, are worth taking. We will do this not just to expand our knowledge or strengthen our national security, but to improve all life here on Earth and inspire the next generation to reach even further. This is why America needs NASA, why the world needs NASA, because there is no more important investment than inspiring our children to build a better and more exciting future. And the best way NASA can do that is by delivering on our mission and ushering in a new golden age of science and discovery, and we will not fail. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Trusty.
Thank you. Chairman Cruz, Ranking Member Cantwell, members of the committee, thank you for convening this hearing. Senator Wicker, thank you so much for your very kind introduction. It has been a privilege to work with you on your staff for nearly 8 years, serving the people of Mississippi and all Americans. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I also thank President Trump for the incredible honor of this nomination to be a commissioner at the Federal Communications Commission. And last but not least, I thank my family for their love and support and I'll briefly introduce those here today and watching via webcast. My parents, Terry and Ellen Trusty, my sisters, Lauren, Jennifer, Angela, Elizabeth, and Caroline, and my brother, TJ, my brothers and sister-in-law, Thomas Ventimiglia, Matthew Burton, Slola Fafita, and Naeem Trusty, and my precious nieces and nephews, Sophia, Thomas, and Julian Ventimiglia, Ella, Jack, Caroline Kay, and Henry Burton, and Isabel, Summer, Ellen, and Lana Trusty. I love you all so very much. Growing up in a large family with 5 sisters and 1 brother, I was taught early on about the value of service. Through my parents' daily actions, they emphasized the importance of helping others, whether through small acts or larger commitments. As I've grown older, I've credited my parents' example to the example set by my paternal and maternal grandfathers, George Preston Trusty Sr. and Ernest DeWitt Powell Jr., both of whom served our country in World War II and the Korean War, respectively. Although my grandfathers came from different backgrounds, they shared a common commitment to defending this country and protecting the values we all hold dear. What brings me here today is my desire to continue the shared commitment to public service and love of country that's been in my family for generations. When I first moved to Washington, D.C. nearly 20 years ago, after graduating from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, I began my career in the public policy office of a telecommunications company. This is where I was introduced to universal service principles and the critical mission of the FCC. During that time, I saw firsthand how access to modern communication services, particularly for Americans living in rural and remote areas, could change lives. I also learned the value of a simple internet connection. It not only gives communities the ability to stay connected with loved ones, but it opens the door to education, jobs, economic opportunities, and so much more. Indeed, it allows Americans to participate fully in society and an ever-expanding global digital economy. Following my time in the private sector, I've had the opportunity to work in the House of Representatives and in this hallowed chamber on telecommunications, technology, consumer protection, and most recently, national security. All of these policy areas are core to the FCC's mission to make available affordable, high-speed, reliable, and secure communication services. Now, in carrying out this mission, it's not lost on me that the problem set facing the Commission is both vast and diverse. The agency must contend with unforgiving geographic landscapes to achieve universal connectivity. It must stay ahead of sophisticated illegal robocallers, defrauding and scamming vulnerable populations like our youth and seniors. It must work with federal partners to defend the security of our communications networks from the attacks of nation-state actors. And it must work collaboratively with private and public sector interests to ensure that the United States leads the world in next-generation communications. Notwithstanding these issues, given my unique experiences working on both this distinguished committee and the Armed Services Committee, as well as the dedication and expertise of FCC staff, I believe these challenges can be overcome. In that spirit, I'd like to offer a short list of commitments on which I hope there is bipartisan consensus if confirmed. If confirmed, I will work with Congress and the administration to expand access to high-speed internet services for all Americans, protect consumers from illegal robocalls, strengthen the security of the nation's telecommunications networks, and restore America's leadership in next-generation communications technologies. Mr. Chairman, thank you again for holding this hearing. I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you to you both. All right, Mr. Isaacman, let's start. If you're confirmed, you will oversee NASA's various field centers, mission directorates, and affiliated activities. This includes Artemis and the Moon to Mars program, which aims to keep us one step ahead of nations like China in the fight for supremacy in space. The threat from China is very real. Just last week, General Saltzman, Chief of Space Operations for the Space Force, testified before the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission that Beijing has been explicit, as recently as October of last year, in stating that China intends to surpass the United States and become the world's preeminent space power. As General Saltzman put it, quote, China's advancement in space technology, their stated desire to dominate, and Beijing's disregard for international norms for the responsible use of space make them an incredible danger to U.S. prosperity and security. China has said that they will put a man on the moon by 2030, and that they will build a permanent lunar base there along with Russia by 2035. Based on how quickly they have already progressed, I think it is quite possible that China reaches those milestones sooner than those dates, and indeed that China reaches the moon before the end of President Trump's current term. Mr. Isaacman, if China beats us to the moon, what consequences might America face?
Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate that question, and I couldn't agree more with all of your commentary, sir, including in your opening remarks. We certainly cannot lose. If we do not lead the way and we're following, we may be following forever, and the consequence of which could be extraordinary. I mean, even if you're talking about things that have maybe even a low probability, let's say, for example, on the lunar surface, helium-3 becomes a new source of fusion power, it could shift the balance of power here on Earth. I don't think we can afford to find that out the hard way. As you said, sir, and I've agreed for a very long time, space is the ultimate high ground. We cannot afford to cede that ground.
So my team did a visual representation of what the stakes are. And it's a simple question: what does the future look like in 2030? Now, I will note that my team used ChatGPT to make this poster. And my immediate comment on seeing it is the American flag is too damn small. And I was told it was difficult to get a bigger American flag on AI. That may be underscoring the need to win the race for AI as well. But it does give a sense of exactly what the choices we're facing. Now, when we met in my office, you said beating China back to the moon was, quote, critical for our national interests. You also said that if President Trump turns on the television and sees Chinese astronauts on the surface of the moon before Americans, you said you would be fired that day. In your written testimony, however, you said, quote, we will prioritize sending American astronauts to Mars. There seems to be a bit of tension between the commitment you made in my office and your testimony. What is your view? Will you maintain course with the Artemis program so that we can return American astronauts to the moon before President Trump leaves office?
Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate the statement. First, I couldn't agree more with the president and his inspiring and ambitious goal to send American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on Mars. He didn't say we shouldn't go to the moon. I suspect the president, as I feel, and probably a lot of Americans, is what's taking us so long to get back to the moon, and why does it cost so much money? I absolutely want to see us return to the moon. As I mentioned in my prepared remarks, determine the economic, scientific, and national security value while we are also proceeding towards Mars. I don't think we have to make any tough trades here, Senator. I think if we can concentrate our resources at the world's greatest space agency, we don't have to make a binary decision of moon versus Mars, or moon has to come first versus Mars. I think we could be paralleling these efforts and doing the near impossible, which is exactly why the American taxpayers funded NASA in the first place.
Well, I will say on the question of whether NASA has to implement moon then Mars, United States law is explicit and unequivocal on that. 51 U.S.C. Section 20302, which Senator Cantwell and I wrote, says, vision for space exploration. The administrator shall establish a program to develop a sustained human presence in cislunar space or on the moon as a stepping stone to future exploration of Mars and other destinations. The notion of the moon as a stepping stone is explicitly in U.S. law. Do you acknowledge that?
Yes, I do, Senator.
And let me ask you, given the current NASA budget, if we assume for a moment we're not going to see a dramatic shift and NASA's budget double tomorrow, do you believe it is possible to stand up a full mission to the moon and a full mission to the Mars simultaneously?
Senator, as I mentioned in my prepared remarks, I think we can absolutely do that. We can figure out the space economy in low Earth orbit. We can run more scientific missions. This is the agency that went from sending Alan Shepard on a suborbital mission, and 8 years later, we saw Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the surface of the moon. Do I think that we can get back to the moon, chart a course for Mars, and do all the other things? Absolutely, Senator.
So do we have your commitment that you will not allow the scenario on the right on this poster to happen, that China will not beat us to the moon, that one of these heroes sitting in this room will set his or her, and as a father of 2 daughters, I'm particularly excited that Artemis is committed. It will be a her. The first woman will step foot on the moon, and she will be an American astronaut. Do we have your commitment that we will win the race to the moon and China will not beat us?
Senator, I only see the left-hand portion of that poster.
And next time we'll make the American flag bigger. Senator Cantwell.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that the poster be placed in the record.
An excellent idea, and a chairman who was crossing his T's and dotting his I's would have done so already without objection. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And continuing on this same point, listen, I have no doubt of your capabilities at the technical side of this and the expertise, both on the aviation and the space side. It's a question, I think, of a long-term challenge of different administrations to deliver on this goal and how each administration and each Congress does or doesn't support it. So I view your job as like wrangling the powers that be to support the mission and understand what it's going to take to support the mission. So like Senator Cruz, I want to understand a little bit more about your commitments. The most recent economic impact report highlighted that in fiscal year 2023, NASA projects to generate more than $75 billion in economic output. And the National Academy studies chaired by Norm Augustine found that NASA's budget is often incompatible with the scope, complexity, and difficulty of its mission work. That means that we end up shortchanging it to certain degrees. So I want to make sure I understand what your commitment is, because there's been so much in the press. Do you commit not to closing any of the NASA's 10 centers or divesting from critical infrastructure without the expressed authorization of Congress?
Senator, you absolutely have my commitment to work alongside Congress. I think NASA is going to require the best and brightest from across the nation and all of our critical infrastructure in order to achieve its mission to do the near impossible for all humankind.
Do you see any reason to close these 10 centers?
Senator, there's only so much that I can be briefed on in advance of this opportunity. I fully expect to roll up my sleeves and determine, where all of our best resources are, so we can get back to achieving the mission as quickly as possible.
The 2024 National Academy's report noted that the use of service and firm fixed-price contracts at early stage of technology development can jeopardize mission success and degrade NASA's own in-house technical capabilities. What are your thoughts about these fixed-term contracts?
Senator, as
someone that statement, I guess, do you agree with that statement? They can be deleterious. I'm just asking if you agree with that.
Well, I take two things away from that, Senator. First, having run a defense aerospace company for more than a decade, and generally I am a fan of fixed firm price contracts and being held accountable to what we bid. In terms of the difference between NASA's in-house expertise and what commercial industry is able to provide, I believe NASA should be working on, again, per my prepared remarks, on the near impossible, what no one else is capable of doing. And when they figure it out, commercial industry takes over and brings the rest of the world to follow.
You might be one heck of a entrepreneur in relation to science. You said you're not a scientist. But that won't matter if we make very bad decisions based on somebody's arbitrary budget analysis instead of what is our long-term mission. So that's what we're trying to get out of you. How do you think we're going to accomplish this so that we have a more, listen, the more we can explain this to everybody, I guarantee you the more my colleagues will support it in a budget. The more it gets slashed and burned by different approaches, by DOGE, the more harmful it can become to people undermining the support for the mission overall. So you have a big challenge here. It's to move us forward at a critical moment. where are you, so do you believe that we should have a reduction in workforce or the science budget, some of the things that I mentioned in my opening statement?
Senator, I read what's on NASA Watch and in the news like everybody else. If I'm confirmed, I am eager to understand all of the considerations, the discussions being made about a reorganization. I believe that we are going to need the best and brightest to do the near impossible, and we should be concentrating all of our resources on the most critical objectives that I kind of outlined in my opening remarks, ma'am.
Do you support the continued Artemis mission with the Space Launch System?
Senator, I believe that is currently the plan. I'd like nothing more than to see this Artemis 2 crew get around the moon, and then they're back at home watching their friends walk on the moon. I think the real question is again, why has it taken so long? Why does it cost so much money?
But in the issue of, are we going to commit to this? I think this and the lander redundancy are kind of like, people see that as we're going to the moon and we're going to get this done, not this discussion of like, we're going to skip these things, shortchange this, and then we're going to focus on Mars in a different route. That's what I'm trying to get from you. Whether when you get there, I get that you're saying it's the current plan. I'm asking as a nominee to run this organization, do you have a different view of that you think right now there is a different way to do this?
Well, ma'am, I can tell you not just as a nominee, but as a space enthusiast who wants my daughters to see American astronauts walking on the moon. It was the left-hand side of that poster that I'm fully supportive of. I'd like nothing more than to see Artemis 2 get around the moon and, again, see Americans walking on the moon. And, again, I don't think these are either or. I mean, NASA is an extraordinary agency that can do the near impossible. We can chart a course for Mars in line with the president's vision to return to the moon before the Chinese can get there, to figure out the space economy and do the other things, ma'am.
There's a lot here. So the HiCam program on thermoplastic composites, do you support that program at NASA?
I think NASA has the best, brightest, most talented engineers and scientists, and we should be working on cutting-edge technology.
Okay, I will want for the record whether you support that. In clarity, not just like, hey, I like cutting edge technology. These are really big decisions that lots of us have already weighed in on, and we just want to know whether they're going to get slashed someday because the president wakes up and says he doesn't want to do it, and whether you're going to say yes, yeah, go ahead. So it will take all of us working together. Ms. Trusty, I don't want you to keep going ignored through the conversation. My time has expired. I will want to come back to you on the MVD, the broadcasters getting more ability in the marketplace, particularly as I mentioned earlier. You want a vibrant news competition, particularly when it comes to local journalism, reopening that case at the FCC, but I will take that for coming back on a second round. And I love that Senator Wicker thinks that you play chess instead of checkers, because we need a lot more chess playing at the FCC. Thank you.
Grandmaster Wicker.
Also, you can go out and shoot skeet and then come back and play chess. But thank you very much. Well, let me direct my first question to Mr. Isaacman. You probably know that NASA has 8 field centers, one of which is the John C. Stennis Space Center in Mississippi. The Stennis Space Center is home to NASA's largest rocket propulsion test site. If we didn't have that, we'd have to build another one. The Stennis Space Center also hosts a number of companies working on commercial space programs. The Space Center's infrastructure represents substantial government investment as well as private investments. So the day after you're confirmed and sworn in, will you come to visit me in Mississippi at the Stennis Space Center?
I will get there as soon as I possibly can, Senator.
All right. Well, I think that's a fair answer. Now, Ms. Trusty, let's talk about the plan for broadband bill. We finally got that reported a few weeks ago, and you worked with members of this committee, even as a staff member for the Armed Services Committee, in getting some compromise language on the Plan for Broadband Act. Do we need it? And what accommodations did we make to get everybody on the same page?
Senator, thank you so much.
Take about a minute and a half.
Okay. Thank you so much for the question. Thank you for your leadership in on this issue. You know, interagency coordination is essential to closing the digital divide. I think as many members on this committee know, there are about 130 broadband programs across 15 different agencies, and GAO has determined that those programs are fragmented and duplicative. And there's an opportunity to streamline, consolidate, and coalesce these programs so that the resources are better targeted to unserved areas so that we can get communication services to more rural, remote areas that lack connectivity right now, and expand and close the digital divide, or just close the digital divide, not expand it. And so I think the Plan for Broadband Act is the key to this solution. It creates a strategy that will help us to target these resources better to unserved communities so that everybody can fully participate in the global digital economy.
And we had to accommodate high-cost areas, tribal areas, and also do some compromising on the spending cap. So I do appreciate that. Let me ask then in the last 2 minutes. During COVID-19, the broadband across Europe suffered several disruptions. Did we have that kind of disruption in the United States, or was there a difference, and why do you think things may have turned out differently in Europe as opposed to here in the United States?
Thank you so much, Senator. I appreciate this question. You know, I think the reason why we did not face the same issues here during the COVID pandemic as it relates to our internet networks is because competition and innovation, a light touch regulatory framework we saw worked really well. We just have not seen the predicted harms materialize in the absence of more prescriptive legacy regulations. And so under your leadership when I was on this committee, to ensure consumers were protected, even if competition and innovation fail, you set up a bipartisan net neutrality working group to put together bipartisan legislation to ensure that consumers were protected regardless, but that we had a modern framework. I thought that was a great example of how to move forward with our next generation networks and ensure that consumers continued to have access to critical connectivity services.
Has there been any throttling or blocking in the United States in recent years?
Senator, I'm not aware of any of the predicted harms materializing that were projected during this debate a couple of years ago.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Isaacman, I'd just like to start with you. I guess I just wanted a little more clarity about, are you committed to having a permanent presence on the moon?
Senator, I think the biggest thing is we need to get back there. It's been taking a very long time, and the American taxpayers have invested an awful lot.
I agree with you on that front. Yeah. I think we can take that for granted between me and you. But I guess I want to get a sense, because the chairman laid this out actually, and the poster that he had wasn't just about getting back to the moon, but it was about sustaining a presence on the moon. And I just feel like I don't have a good understanding of what your actual position is right now on that.
Well, I think, Senator, the first step to me is to return to the moon and determine its economic, its scientific, and its national security value for remaining there.
I saw that in your statement, and I guess I was confused because in your response to the chairman, you were talking about how helium-3, this is something that could very well shift the balance of power within the here on Earth. What else are you looking at? Like, what else is in your mind right now beyond helium-3 and the impacts there when you're talking about scientific, economic, and national security?
Well, Senator, that's what we need to get there to find out. All the best science fiction movies out there have something like helium-3 as the economic justification for an enduring presence, not just on the moon, but throughout space exploration.
So I guess, kind of as we've been talking about this, moon, Mars, two priorities, you were much more definitive about saying we need to get to Mars. So I guess I just want to ask you that same question. What are the scientific, economic, and national security priorities that you see more clearly when it comes to going to Mars right now than in terms of having a permanent presence on the moon?
Well, Senator, to be clear, I certainly hope in the future that we have lots of space stations, a full lunar outpost, a Mars outpost, and we're pushing even beyond that. I'm just saying we need to get back to the moon. We need to figure out why we need to be there, and I certainly hope there is a reason.
Why do we need to be at, what I'm trying to get a sense of, you seem much more definitive about saying we need to get to Mars and putting resources towards that effort. What are the specific economic, scientific, and national security interests you see there? Because I get a sense that you have some greater clarity there than you do when it comes to the moon.
Well, I would actually hope you're getting a sincere answer from me that we should be doing both and the other things. Now, Mars...
You think we can do both moon and the Mars on the current NASA budget?
I sure hope so. NASA was built to do the near impossible and have a thriving space economy in low Earth orbit and continue extraordinary science missions to kind of unlock the secrets of the universe, sir.
Well, I guess I just want to reinforce what the chairman said. I mean, I think we need to have much more clarity in how we're talking about what it is our objectives when it comes to the moon. As mentioned, we have a lot more clarity about what China's objectives are, and I hope that that is something that you can clarify quickly if you are confirmed. When it comes to the International Space Station, what is your perceived timeline there in terms of when we should be starting to bring that down?
Well, Senator, first of all, I don't know of any reason why we should be bringing it down before what's currently scheduled. What I do think we need to do is maximize its remaining life, get as much of the high potential science and research to the station, figure out what that space economy is, so when the day does come to hand it off to the commercial LEO destinations, they are in a financially, self-sustaining type way.
And you talked about that in terms of the space economy. In terms of what should succeed the International Space Station, do you believe that that should be commercial only, or do you see prospects of the U.S. government or a government-run space station to succeed the International Space Station?
Well, right now, Senator, if we don't figure out the space economy, whether it's commercially operated or not, it's going to be entirely financially sustained by the government.
So but I guess I'm asking, do you have a preference in terms of, do you see a sense of need for a government run? I guess I'm just trying to ask you, what is it that NASA can do that commercial efforts can't do?
Well, that's a fantastic question, Senator. I mean, the line should be drawn, again, in terms of NASA undertaking the near impossible challenges that, again, no company, organization, or agency anywhere in the world would be able to undertake it. I gave a very good example, I think, in my opening remarks on nuclear propulsion. That's something that no company would ever embark upon. There is no obvious economic return. There's regulatory challenges. That's exactly the kind of thing that NASA should be concentrating its resources on.
The last thing I just want to say here, and I know I'm running out of time, I'm really hard to see. I think we're all very proud of the astronauts that are here in this room. But I think I could speak for them and say, look, we also recognize the importance of the civil servants playing so many different roles for the safety and the innovation that's out there. As I expressed to you, I am concerned about how this administration has approached what I believe are indiscriminate cuts at and firings at different departments and agencies. And if you're confirmed, I hope that you stand up against indiscriminate cuts. I think we're all very recognizing that there are places for efficiencies and elsewhere, but we need to make sure that we're protecting the expertise that's out there. With that, I'll yield back.
Thank you. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our two nominees today for your commitment to public service. Ms. Trusty, I appreciated meeting with you to learn more about your experience and your goals if you're confirmed as an FCC commissioner. And as you know, one of my top goals is to maintain a steady and predictable universal service fund. Congress's intent has been clear. We must keep all Americans connected. I also look forward to co-chairing the Universal Service Fund Working Group with Senator Lujan to advance this priority. Ms. Trusty, how do you view the Universal Service Fund and its mission to universal service?
Thank you so much for the question, Senator, and thank you for the time. It was great to meet with you and discuss your priorities. The universal service is the cornerstone of the FCC's mission. The Universal Service Fund itself has connected millions of Americans across the country. As you know, there's somewhat of an uncertain future with the Universal Service Fund, as there's a constitutional challenge before the Supreme Court, and the contribution base is shrinking as more Americans shift to internet-based communications. And so I think it's incumbent upon the FCC to work closely with Congress and interested stakeholders to identify a specific, predictable, and sufficient form of support as required in the Communications Act to continue meeting the needs of Americans across the country.
Thank you. From my experience serving on this committee and also on Armed Services Committee, I appreciate the differing cultures, missions, and priorities of the various spectrum stakeholders, and I've seen the consequences when they conflict. I worry that federal missions, including national security, can be undermined because of these frictions, particularly when collaboration among stakeholders is strained and consensus can't be reached. Ms. Trusty, what do you think the appropriate role is for the FCC and its engagement with the Department of Defense?
Thank you, Senator. And I appreciate this question because I know this is such an important topic and a sensitive one, too. So, as you've noted, I've worked on both the Armed Services and Commerce committees, both great experiences. During my time on the Armed Services Committee, I've certainly developed a greater appreciation for DoD's national security mission and how critical spectrum is in carrying out that mission. I also know from my time on the Commerce Committee that spectrum is the lifeblood of wireless communications. It's essential to meeting our economic objectives both domestically and abroad. And so I think given these two experiences, I can certainly help find solutions where there's common ground, where we don't have to sacrifice our spectrum for our warfighting needs, but we can also create opportunities to repurpose spectrum for commercial use. And I think the way to do that, frankly, is to have everybody in the same room at the same time, hearing the same things. Otherwise, I think there's a lot of information that gets lost in translation, contributing to further misalignment on spectrum policy. When we're all together, it can further promote transparency and accountability in these processes.
How do you think this dialogue can become more constructive? Do you have any suggestions on how to do that? As a member of the staff on the Armed Services Committee, you had access to classified briefings that others do not have access to. So you have a fuller understanding of what's at stake here. So how can we have a constructive dialogue?
Well, Senator, I think that's the issue. When I was on the Commerce Committee, I didn't have a full clearance, and so I wasn't privy to many of DoD's assets and capabilities. But when I was on the Armed Services Committee, I had a clearance and could understand better, or to a better degree, why some of the assets and systems were so essential. I'll say, though, I think we have to find a way to accommodate both our national security and economic security interests. I worry that if either side of this debate fails, then our global competitors win, and I think that would have a devastating consequence to our economic and national security.
And I think we're beginning to achieve that way forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Looking at the international role on telecommunications, how can a more unified position among federal agencies boost the United States global leadership? How can we ensure that national security perspectives are included in an overall position that we have for this country?
Absolutely, Senator. Thank you for this. So I had the opportunity to attend the last WRC in Dubai, and I think the takeaway was that America didn't put our best foot forward because we didn't have a unified approach to our spectrum policy. And so I think if we have a unified strategy where we highlight key U.S. interests, whether with respect to both our economic and national security, it gives us more time and space to work with our international partners and allies to develop coalitions where they have a lot of similar interests. And going into it that way, we can preempt those who are attempting to undermine U.S. values, among other things.
And if confirmed as an FCC commissioner, the commission as a whole would definitely have a leadership role in that process, correct?
Absolutely. So the Department of State typically runs the WRC process, but NTIA and the FCC certainly contribute to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to both of you for being here. You win the prize as the best name for a nominee, Ms. Trusty. I just wanted to have one follow-up from Senator Fisher's questions, because I care a lot about universal service. Senator Thune and I have worked a lot on that together. How do you think the FCC should modernize the USF to ensure its long-term sustainability?
Thank you for the question, Senator. You know, I know that there are a number of proposals on the table, whether it comes from identifying a specific, predictable, or sufficient funding resource to ensure the Universal Service Fund can continue to meet connectivity needs across the country. There are proposals about a federal appropriation or looking to other private sector entities to contribute to the contribution base. I think all of those things should be discussed between the FCC and Congress to ensure we can continue meeting connectivity needs across the country.
Thank you. As you know, I work with Senator Wicker on the Data Act to improve the accuracy of the FCC's broadband availability maps, but we know more work needs to be done. If confirmed, how will you continue to work to ensure the accuracy of the maps?
Thank you, Senator. So, you know, I was on this committee when the Broadband Data Act was passed with the goal of making sure we knew where broadband is available, where it's not, to better target resources to unserved areas. You know, as a part of that law, there's an opportunity for a challenge process where folks can challenge the accuracy of the data, which I think can help improve the accuracy of the maps. I also think the FCC should work with private sector stakeholders who produce their own maps to inform the accuracy of the maps so that we can better target resources to areas who remain unserved, or who remain served.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And as you know, care a lot about getting the broadband funding out. We've talked to a number of nominees about that. And then I'll ask you a question in writing on 911. So
okay. Thank you,
thank you. Mr. Isaacman, welcome. And we had a good talk over the phone. I mentioned STEM was really important to me. I was looking back in 2017, President Trump signed into law. I remember because Senator Fisher called me from the White House. She was there, and she said, "What is this bill of yours he's signing into law?" Because she happened to be there. And they did an event. So it was a bill authorizing the NASA administrator to encourage women to study STEM. It's called the Inspire Women Act, and pursue careers in aerospace. Could you talk about promoting the STEM workforce and in your role, if confirmed as NASA administrator, how you can inspire more people to go into STEM in general? Just coming off the robotics competition in Minnesota on Saturday. Thank you. I was there.
Understood, Senator. First step is I'm still working on getting my two daughters to want to grow up and enter into the STEM fields. I've tried with spaceflight, and I will get there. I would love to answer that really in two parts. I think the first thing is it is a fundamental obligation of NASA to inspire the next generation to want to be scientists, engineers, astronauts, pilots, doctors, researchers. And I think the best way NASA can do that is by executing on its mission. I mean, that is what's going to have children want to dress up as astronauts and scientists for Halloween, is to get back to the moon, to get to Mars, and to inspire the world with whatever the replacement is someday for James Webb that gives us 100 times the resolution. The second part, ma'am, is what I mentioned in my opening remarks about NASA being a force multiplier for science. Once we inspire them in their youth to want to grow up and join this grand endeavor, we want to get them hands-on in their various academic institutions. I think NASA can lend its expertise, its talent, its bulk buying of rockets, its standard bus architecture, and get academic institutions to want to contribute, whether it's building probes or sensors, get them hands-on so when they graduate, they want to join the greatest space agency in the world.
Very good. You know, I think not just with space, but also with medical developments right now, because of a combination of mapping of the human genome. I'm home of Mayo Clinic, Minnesota, as well as the potential of AI to do good when it comes to things like rare diseases. We're just on this cusp of scientific development kind of bursting out. And I do get concerned about some of these cuts to science-based research and agencies across the government, not just space-related. Will you be an advocate for science within the administration?
Yes, ma'am. I do believe the president is looking to usher in a golden age of science and discovery. Personally, I just spent a few days ago with 40 different science and researchers sharing the results from my most recent mission to space. I'm passionate about science. I'd love nothing more than to continue to see NASA go out and try and unlock the secrets of the universe.
Thank you.
Phenomenal plugs for Minnesota in that questioning.
Always find a way. You'll learn that soon, Mr. Marino.
So Senator Moran, see if you can top that for Kansas.
Well, that wasn't what I intended to talk about, but I'm happy to promote my state and have to, certainly to Mr. Isaacman. Wichita, in particular, the air capital of the world, Wichita State, NIAR, and these astronauts, when I had a conversation with them by phone, asked me the question, do you know that you have the greatest space museum in the world in Kansas? To which I said, I know that. I'm just pleased that you know that. Can I tell the rest of the world that you're saying those things? And so I thank you for that opportunity, the Cosmosphere in Hutchinson, Kansas. Ms. Trusty, let me start with you. I'm pleased by your nomination that President Trump has chosen to nominate you. I appreciate the friendship you and I have had over a long period of time of my office in Dirksen, and we've passed and had conversations in the hall for a long time. I have great faith in you. Let me ask you these, on that topic, let me tell you that it's been my disappointment over time to watch the FCC become much more partisan and incapable of reaching decisions. It's changed in the time that I've been in the Senate, as the Senate has changed in the time that I've been in the Senate. And I would encourage you to use every effort to find ways to find solutions to problems and to bring the commission together to serve the American people. And I don't know that I need to ask you, but I assume you would say that you will do so.
Yes, absolutely, Senator.
Thank you. I want to mention just spectrum policy, as a couple of my colleagues have mentioned before. Looking at Congress's options about authorities to the FCC when it comes to reauthorizing that spectrum auction authority, what would your recommendations be?
Thank you, Senator. I think this is very important. So I would recommend that Congress restore auction authority as quickly as possible. I think it can be a catalyst to investment and innovation, particularly as it relates to expanding broadband infrastructure across the country. I also think it serves as a signal to the rest of the world about how we're prioritizing our telecommunications policy and where we're going. This is underpinning every emerging application that we can think of: artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and so much more. And so I think by showing that we have confidence in our regulatory processes and frameworks to have auction authority restored to support that kind of innovation, I think that will go a long way.
Ms. Trusty, media ownership is back in the news again. Do you believe it's important for the FCC to rid us of the rules that are no longer necessary or inhibit competition that currently exist in media ownership rules?
Yeah, appreciate the question, Senator. I definitely think we need a modern regulatory framework that reflects the realities of today's video media marketplace. As you know, the media marketplace has changed dramatically over the last 2 decades, driven largely by technology advancements and changes in consumer preferences. Consumers have access to all sorts of things, your traditional broadcast and cable, as well as live streaming video and social media, all things that make for a great personalized television viewing experience, and things that I think the FCC should continue to promote, that allows broadcasters to flexibly compete against technology companies for ad revenues, consumer viewers, as well as programming.
Ms. Trusty, that's particularly true in rural America, where the options are fewer than they used to be, and local programming is a difficult task to accomplish. So I encourage you to pursue those changes. One more, BEAD implementation. One of the things we're worried about is the timing of the FCC's efforts in deploying broadband funds when BEAD is yet uncompleted, because one of the goals is to make sure that we don't overbuild and that you're not both providing dollars to the same opportunities to provide broadband and internet services. So how would you consider the FCC in holding off moving forward on allocating 5G funding until BEAD allocation decisions have been made in order to maximize that, the efficiency of those 5G funds?
I appreciate this question, Senator. This goes to the heart of interagency coordination. I think the FCC and NTIA need to be in constant contact about where BEAD is going, when it's going, so that we can be better stewards of taxpayer dollars, target funds to unserved areas, ensure that there's no duplication or overbuilding, as you mentioned. And there could be a possibility where BEAD infrastructure could be leveraged for USF funds or vice versa. But I think this all goes to interagency coordination and making sure we're the best stewards of taxpayer dollars. So you have my commitment that I would do that, Senator, if confirmed.
Thank you. Mr. Isaacman, let me tell you that I now have concern about your leadership capabilities. While you were indicating that you were working on getting your daughters to pursue STEM education, both of them were shaking their heads this way. I hope you can fare better at NASA.
We're going to fix this, Senator.
In the short 12 seconds that I have left in my time, I'll ask, I guess, one question. Do you believe that the current Artemis architecture featuring SLS rocket or Orion spacecraft is the best and fastest way to beat China to the moon?
Senator, this is the current plan. I do believe it's the best and fastest way to get there. I don't think it's the long-term way to get to and from the moon and to Mars with great frequency, but this is the plan we have now, and we've got to get this crew around the moon and the follow-on crew to land on the moon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I recognize Senator from Michigan, Gary Peters.
Thank you, Senator. Congratulations to both of our nominees here on your nomination to these important positions. Mr. Isaacman, we had a great opportunity to talk yesterday in my office about a variety of issues. Artemis came up frequently, as I know it's come up at the hearing frequently as well, including Senator Moran in the previous question. And you suggested here and there that NASA can pursue the Artemis program or a mission to the moon and a potential Mars mission in parallel tracks, is how you've been describing it. I'm concerned, though, about the possibility of achieving that while we expect budget cuts to NASA. We've already seen cuts, and somewhat significant cuts, I would argue, to staff at NASA. So my question for you is, do you agree that budget cuts would undermine that vision that you are expressing?
Well, Senator, I think right now NASA has a pretty extraordinary budget. I believe it's close to every federal law enforcement agency combined ×2. With that budget and those resources available, I do believe we can do the near impossible. I think we can have multiple flagship scientific missions at once, which means we can have multiple space exploration missions at once and try and solve the space economy in low Earth orbit, sir.
Even with budget cuts, you'll be able to do that?
Well, Senator, I'm not familiar with what what's potentially being contemplated, but I will absolutely do the most with the resources available to try and deliver on NASA's world-changing mission, sir.
So given I think it's pretty clear we're likely to see constrained budgets, how do you envision speeding up our timeline for the Mars mission that you talked about while also ensuring that Artemis is properly resourced and protected from any future cuts that may come their way?
Well, Senator, I think across the board, we have to acknowledge, as I mentioned in our opening remarks, we do have problems here. The presidents have called for return to the moon and a path to Mars since 1989. We spent a lot of money, and we haven't gotten this crew around the moon, let alone landing on it. If I'm confirmed, I absolutely am going to roll up my sleeves and get in the trenches with the best and brightest and figure out where we have our program challenges, what's impeding progress, clear those obstacles, and get back to delivering on the mission. If we can do that, then we're going to get the inspirational side of NASA going, we're going to get the STEM side growing, and the next generation is going to grow up and want to reach even farther, sir.
As you know, public-private partnerships between NASA and commercial space companies is a critical part of space exploration efforts. You know that firsthand from your flight to space twice with SpaceX. And I understand that you have business ties with SpaceX previous to your nomination as well. My question for you, given the fact that Elon Musk serves both as the CEO of SpaceX as well as is a White House employee and leader over DOGE, which has significant influence over spending and contracts, at least that's what we have been seeing. Certainly in our meeting, I was happy to hear you say to me that you are not beholden to Elon Musk in any way. So I want to give you an opportunity to say that on the record, if I may. So first, have you had any communication, emails, text, or calls with Elon Musk regarding how your plan to manage NASA since you were nominated?
Not at all, Senator.
What steps will you take, if confirmed, to ensure that he is not allowed undue influence, given the extensive contracts that he has with NASA, to make sure that he has no undue influence over the awarding or the implementation of those contracts?
Well, I think, Senator, I absolutely want to be clear. My loyalty is to this nation, the space agency, and their world-changing mission. I have to imagine that in the 1960s, Administrator Webb would have taken phone calls and welcomed the input from all the various contractors that were contributing to the endeavor. But they're the contractors. NASA's the customer. They work for us, not the other way around, Senator.
Very good. Ms. Trusty, you have a deep history working on defense-related spectrum issues that are absolutely critical, as you know, to our security apparatus. However, agencies other than the DoD use spectrum for key public safety applications, and I believe that they need to be protected as well. One such band is 5.9, also known as the auto safety spectrum, which is overseen by the Department of Transportation. This band allows for the deployment of safety technologies, including cellular vehicle-to-everything technology that certainly enables collision avoidance, freight efficiency movements, and a whole lot more. In 2020, some of the spectrum was allocated away from these auto safety purposes, which in my mind will reduce roadway safety in the long term. And I believe we can't let that happen again. I think my senator from Ohio will agree that we have to make sure auto safety is always put at the forefront of considerations when it comes to the spectrum. So my question to you is, if confirmed, will you commit to protecting the remaining auto safety spectrum for roadway safety innovation like the cellular vehicle-to-everything technology?
Senator, thank you for this question. And it's really important to me. In my time in the House, I worked closely with NHTSA on vehicle safety issues. So I'm very familiar with the life-saving potential of CVDX, V2V. And so I think if confirmed, my responsibility is to put spectrum to its highest and best use, meaning maximizing its economic and societal benefits. When it comes to vehicle safety, that will certainly be a part of the information in the record, and I'd be happy to work with you to ensure that CVDX can be deployed with the resources it needs so it's readily available to all Americans.
Well, I hope it is a priority, and we'll, if confirmed, we will work closely with you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to each of you for getting that testimony in and for being here today. We appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. Mr. Isaacman, I was so pleased to hear you talk about nuclear propulsion. We have Oak Ridge National Labs. We have Arnold Air, which is the only place you can do hypersonic testing. And of course, Huntsville and Marshall Space Flight is very close to our Tennessee border. We have a lot of Tennesseans that are there. So pleased to hear you put some emphasis on that. We agree with you that emphasis needs to be placed there. But I want you to just give me a synopsis of what you think is the most important area of competition as we look at what is happening with China, with Russia, with great power competition, what North Korea and Iran are doing.
Senator, thank you very much for the question. For starters, competition can work really well. I think competition from a commercial perspective is doing great. We've gone from a world where at one point in time the nation had a dependency on one launch provider and foreign rocket technology. Now we have a very mature commercial industry with several providers able to help us accelerate mass and people and astronauts into orbit. Well, competition works well on the global stage as well, ma'am, so long as we don't lose. And right now, I mean, that couldn't be more important in the ultimate high ground of space. I mean, that is a critically important domain. NASA will continue to press out, lead the way in that ultimate high ground, but we're going to need our partners in the Department of Defense, the Space Force. We're going to need to be collaborating and making sure they're watching out for us.
Ms. Trusty, welcome, and I'm so pleased to see so many of your family members here to support you, and to all of the, I guess it's nieces and nephews that are here.
That's right, and siblings and friends.
Well, just know she's really smart, and she's working hard. Okay, we talked a little bit about spectrum, and as you know, it concerns me that 60% of our mid-band spectrum is held by federal agencies. Much of that is sitting fallow, is not being used. We cannot afford that. We're commercializing only 5% of that. So talk to me about the importance of NTIA conducting an inventory the importance of the FCC supporting an inventory, the importance of Congress restoring the ability to have spectrum auction authority.
Thank you, Senator, for this question. So I'll start kind of from the first part about restoring auction authority. As I mentioned previously, I think this is incredibly important to our economic and national security. I think auction authority serves as a catalyst to investment and innovation, not just for broadband deployment across this country, but for emerging technologies and applications that will allow us to be a global leader in technological innovation. As far as supporting an inventory, I think an inventory could be good. It tells us what spectrum is being used and how. As you know, there may be some things that are classified or sapped and they won't be available to the public, but certainly members of the committee could have access to that information to make more informed decisions about spectrum management. But I think we do need to have a full view of what's available, what's being used, so that we can properly put spectrum to its highest and best use for economical.
And maybe even share some of that spectrum.
Potentially, as the studies indicate. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about USF. I know Senator Fisher and Senator Klobuchar asked you about that. And I think USF has outlived its usefulness and needs to be replaced with something different. We'll see what the court has to say about it. So articulate reforms if they say you can keep USF, and replacement if they say you cannot.
Sure, Senator, I appreciate this question. So universal service is the cornerstone of the FCC's mission. It's a part of the Communications Act to advance and preserve universal service generally as a concept.
I just want to know reforms. Yeah.
Yes, Senator. So there could be distribution reforms or contribution reforms, depending on what the facts tell us. I think there's an opportunity to have performance metrics for each of the programs to understand what the efficacy is of each of those programs in addressing the needs. There could be better oversight over eligibility requirements. There could also be better oversight over participating providers' compliance with those programs to ensure that those dollars are being targeted to those who need them.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to send you one question on payola.
Yes, ma'am.
Because that is so important to our artists there in Tennessee. And to each of you, all the children deserve ice cream. They've been awesome today.
Thank you, Senator.
I would ask Senator Blackburn, is the ice cream limited to the children?
Senator Cruz, you showed up on time today, so you too deserve ice cream. I will be certain that at lunch I serve you ice cream.
I will take it. Senator Lujan.
Well, it looks like I'm joining you for lunch, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you for this hearing today. It's good to see you both here and with family support. That means something. Ms. Trusty, in last month's Supreme Court oral arguments in the USF case, the Solicitor General noted that the FCC commissioners do not have statutory for-cause removal protections. In our meeting yesterday, you stated that the issue of for-cause removal was subject to pending litigation and that you would not weigh in. Regardless, it appears that President Trump believes he can fire you at will when confirmed. How will you maintain your independence if the president can fire you simply because he may not like a position you take?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the question, and I understand the importance of the issue. My job, if confirmed, is to focus on upholding and enforcing the law. Whatever happens with what's subject to pending litigation, my first obligation is to fax the law and with respect to the proceeding that comes before the commission. And that's, I think the FCC has a very transparent and open process. And my commitment would be to making sure that I have, what I would commit to, I have no fear, I would, without fear or favor, I would make a decision with respect to any individual or entity that comes before the commission.
I appreciate that. Yesterday when we spoke, I shared with you as a former utility commissioner and the importance of the training I received as an administrative law judge. And while we may be able to gather information elsewhere, it's the importance of the record. the decisions that will be made that are in front of you will be based on the record that is established. Is that something you agree with?
Yes, Senator.
I appreciate that. Ms. Trusty, as I shared with you yesterday, I've also been very disturbed by the actions taken by Chair Carr to investigate broadcast companies for their editorial decision-making. In January, Chair Carr reinstated complaints against ABC regarding its moderation of the debate between Trump and Harris. Trump complained that the debate was, quote, rigged, and stated, quote, they ought to take away their license for the way they did that. Do you think it's appropriate for the president to call for the revocation of broadcast licenses?
So, Senator, I think President Trump has First Amendment rights to express his views. My responsibility, if confirmed, is to focus on the facts, FCC precedent, and the law in carrying out whatever the decision-making process is for proceeding before the commission.
As part of that, in March of 2025, Chair Carr gave an interview to Bloomberg News in which he said, any business that are looking for FCC approval, I would encourage them to get busy ending any sort of their invidious forms of DEI discrimination. In addition, Chair Carr said that CBS's editorial decision regarding an interview with Vice President Harris would factor into the review. My question to you is, do you think it's appropriate to consider a broadcaster's editorial decisions when reviewing a merger?
So, Senator, with respect to mergers or transactions, I would look at them through the lens of what advances the public interest. As you know, these are very fact-specific cases that require a thoughtful and thorough review of information in the record, and I would be guided by the statute.
Let me ask the question very clearly. Do you believe that the FCC should be weaponized against media organizations?
No, Senator.
I appreciate that very much. Now, Mr. Isaacman, I have many questions for you. I want to be, I'm always aware of my members, my colleagues' time as well. I'm going to submit your questions to the record. Ms. Trusty, I just want to conclude by sharing with you that you have an ethical record. You have a strong reputation on Capitol Hill. Protect it. You have a bright future. We need good Democrats, good Republicans. I don't agree with all your positions. I don't agree with all my Democratic colleagues' positions. But the FCC should be a strong, independent body. We need good people there, and I appreciate you being here today. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, before we continue, for the record, Senator Fetterman would like to be recorded as an aye by proxy on the Roth nomination.
Without objection, the record will be corrected to so reflect. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our nominees, congratulations, and thank you for willing to serve your country and your families. Great to see so many families here. Ms. Trusty, I want to make sure I get your commitment off the bat to come to Alaska, see the many challenges we have in Alaska. You can bring your whole family. We can do it during the summer. Go fishing, but I need you to get out to my state and see the challenges, particularly as it relates to communications, broadband, internet connectivity. You know, people talk about rural, and then there's Alaska, which is just way more rural than everywhere else. Can I get your commitment to do that?
Absolutely, Senator.
And you know, when the FCC commissioners do that, they've all come to our state. They realize that in terms of the FCC, there's really the need for importance on embracing flexible policies as it relates to Alaska. The FCC came up with the Alaska Plan, as I'm sure you're aware of, and then they've now referred to that as the FCC's Alaska Connect Fund. Will you commit to me to working with on any future changes? There's a midpoint pause in 2029 relating to the Alaska Connect pause that gives the FCC the opportunity to look at different flexibilities there. Can I get your commitment to work with me on both what was the Alaska Plan and now the Alaska Connect Fund?
Yes, Senator, I'd be happy to.
That has strong bipartisan support over the last several years in the FCC. Pretty much all the commissioners have supported it. Can I get your commitment on that?
Yes, Senator.
Great. I'm going to ask you a question for the record on media ownership that I'd like your response on. Mr. Isaacman, have you seen the movie The Martian?
I have, Senator.
Okay, I have well, my daughters are older now, but when I took them to see that, they were very inspired. And you kind of have the Hollywood version, the live version right here with all these smart, good-looking astronauts in our hearing room today. Can you give me your ideas on how to promote better through media, maybe even through Hollywood, these upcoming missions to the moon, missions to Mars, to inspire our young people? I think it's a really, really great opportunity. I don't think NASA's always embraced that opportunity, but we have so many exciting things on the horizon, and I mean it when you look at these astronauts and how smart they are and how inspiring they can be to young Americans to serve their country, to study science. Give me your thoughts on that and what an opportunity we have to take advantage of that.
Well, Senator, I completely agree. And as I mentioned before, I think it's a fundamental obligation of NASA to inspire the next generation to want to grow up and be scientists, engineers, astronauts, researchers, and set the bar even higher. And I do believe the first step on that journey is to execute on the mission. I mean, nothing's going to create more future scientists and engineers than seeing American astronauts on the moon, American astronauts on the Mars, in line with President Trump's vision, planting the stars and stripes on Mars. So I do think that is a fundamental obligation. I think that NASA right now, we could do a better job, if confirmed, on emphasizing quality content over quantity. There's, I think, about 300 different NASA social channels. They're awesome. They put a lot of good things out. I think we can narrow that down and make sure we're capturing the really inspirational footage, what everybody wants to see that inspires them to grow up and want to reach even higher.
Good. I think you'll have strong bipartisan support for doing that. I also want to get your commitment, if confirmed, to come to Alaska.
Senator, as a pilot, I've been fortunate to fly around Alaska quite a bit, and I would point out on aircraft that rolled off assembly lines in Wichita. I know Senator Moran would like to hear that. I'm looking forward to returning.
Good, because as you know, and you've helped pioneer commercial space flight, you know better than most that the future of space access isn't just Cape Canaveral or Vandenberg. It is increasingly spread across our entire country, including places like Alaska. The specific spaceport complex on Kodiak Island is the only high-altitude, polar-capable spaceport in the United States. There is rising demand for facilities like that at Kodiak in terms of both government and commercial launches. They've done both, and I would love to take you out to Kodiak Island, not just to see the largest brown bears in the world, of which we have thousands, but a really, really up-and-coming spaceport complex. Have you ever spent time out at the Kodiak Spaceport Complex?
Senator, I have been there. I did not see any bears. I was looking, and I would love to return, sir.
Okay, so you and I are going to return, and we'll get an eye on some bears, maybe do some fishing with Miss Trusty when she brings her family. In all seriousness, that is a spaceport complex that I think has enormous potential. Would you agree with that?
Senator, I think that, as mentioned before, space is the ultimate high ground. It's a vitally important domain for national security. I frankly think we need more spaceports. We have to always ensure our access to low Earth orbit and ensure national security.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And by the way, if anything, Senator Sullivan is underselling the fishing in Alaska. It is phenomenal. It's not quite as big a state as Texas, but it has enormous natural beauty.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, you don't want to do the size stuff with me.
Senator Blunt Rochester, at yet another massive state.
That's correct. That's correct. Delaware. And we are, that's right. We're the first state, though. That's the important thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Ranking Member Cantwell. Welcome, Ms. Trusty and Mr. Isaacman and your families. I'd like to start my questions with Ms. Trusty. As an avid tech person myself, I love this stuff. Based on predictions, I've seen that 6G is coming sometime in the early 2030s. And I've heard exciting things about how 6G networks will be integrated with AI to enable better connectivity. In the House, I was fortunate to lead bills on immersive technology and it really helping us train our workforce. AI literacy was one of the bills that I focused on, and just the notion of being able to do things in real time, real-time adaptive changes presents a lot of opportunities, but it also presents challenges. There were some issues that delayed the initial 5G rollout, such as Huawei's being used as a potential supplier, infrastructure build-out issues, and more. And I view the 6G rollout as a crucial step in our competition against China in the national security realm, as well as technology spaces. Ms. Trusty, if confirmed, what specifically do you think the FCC can do to ensure that the 6G rollout is smoother than the 5G rollout was?
Great, thank you for the question, and I really agree with so much of what you said. I'll start with cybersecurity and making sure networks are deployed in a secure way, and I applaud this committee on making sure the Rip and Replace Fund was fully funded. I've been interested to see the creation of the National Security Council at the FCC, and I think that's an opportunity for the FCC to leverage its authorities in the Secure and Trusted Communications Networks Act to ban other high-risk equipment and vendors from our nation's communications networks. I also think the FCC can promote the adoption of open radio access network technology, which can help diversify and strengthen our domestic supply chain so that we're not overly reliant on one or two vendors. And I think it can help increase security, competition, and ultimately reduce the cost of providing these networks in the first place.
I'm a big supporter as well on strengthening our supply chains. We actually have a Cantwell, Blackburn, Blunt, Rochester bill. I like to call those my strange bedfellows bills, where we come together on these issues that we know are going to affect all of us. I want to also discuss the potential security concerns about 6G, particularly given, again, the flaws in 4G and 5G networks, such as a study finding that 100% of 4G networks were susceptible to denial of service attacks and 5G being vulnerable to network attacks. I know this is an easy one, so maybe it's a yes or no. Will you prioritize cybersecurity for 6G networks?
Yes, Senator.
And what other potential measures do you think the FCC can take to best secure 6G networks in particular?
You know, I think this, a lot of this can be done through AI. I'm really excited about the development of the technology, and I think there are tremendous use cases in not only detecting fraud and scams, but securing the network itself. So if I'm confirmed, I would look to leverage artificial intelligence in these ways.
You kind of preempted my next question, which deals with so many Americans. It's estimated that around 4 million or 4 billion robocalls are made per month. In fact, Delaware, while we're the first state, I don't like the fact that we're the first state in robocall complaints. I think I've probably received 4 of them while I was sitting here. And there's now this AI-powered grandparent scams. Back when I was in the House, as I mentioned some of the legislation I introduced, but we had one on the Fraud and Scam Reduction Act to help tackle scams that target seniors. And I encouraged the FCC, I'm encouraged that they now cover AI voice calls under the TCPA. And last year, now Chair Carr supported requiring callers to disclose upfront to consumers when they receive an AI-generated call. Do you support requiring callers to disclose to consumers when it's an AI-generated call?
I certainly think that can be helpful in protecting consumers from illegal robocallers, Senator.
And I will say consumer protection is one of the areas that we are very much focused on. Should you be confirmed, would like to continue to work with you on that. And Mr. Isaacman, we had a very good conversation as well. I will be submitting questions for the record because I respect the chairman's time. So I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Young.
Well, thank you both for being here today. Mr. Isaacman, the U.S. economy, national defense, infrastructure, they all rely on satellites extensively these days for GPS, for weather, for communications purposes. for surveillance and much more. So a collision or a loss of key satellites could result in even in catastrophic national security and economic costs. As you know, the TRACS system, Traffic Coordination System for Space, was launched in 2024. It's being developed to provide situational awareness data across civil, military, and commercial sectors. Mr. Isaacman, if confirmed, how would you ensure that NASA coordinates with Department of Commerce and DoD on space situational awareness and space traffic management efforts?
Senator, thank you very much for the question. This is a subject that I'm pretty passionate about. My 2 missions to space, the #1 risk we faced was from orbital debris. For starters, I think NASA absolutely will play a role as this new frontier continues to open, and ideally we have lots of space stations and lots of activity and a great flourishing economic environment in space. I believe all of the information that we can gather from our assets on space debris should be funneled into a single mission control that has the ultimate situational awareness. But I have to say also the biggest threat, Senator, is what we can't track. What is so tiny, the millimeter-sized objects at orbital velocity that can shred a satellite or a spacecraft. And in that respect, we have to stop adding to the problem. The United States is very good at not adding to the problem. I can't say that's the same for some of our geopolitical rivals, sir.
Maybe you could speak with a little more specificity about the gravity of the problem. Paint the picture for those who might be watching these proceedings about how extensive this challenge has become, and I'll just let you take it from there.
Senator, absolutely. A lot of people think of whether it's a discarded second stage in orbit or a defunct satellite as the problem. We know where they are, and we can have trajectories that avoid them. The issue is the speck of paint that falls off that satellite that's now traveling at 17,500 miles an hour and can collide with another object going 17,500 miles an hour. I had an opportunity to visit the NASA facility, the White Sands Missile Range, and see what a 1 and 2 millimeter piece of aluminum does at near orbital velocities, and I can tell you what it penetrates through is it's eye-opening to say the least. It is an issue. We certainly need to do all we can to avoid any sort of kinetic conflict in low Earth orbit to stop adding to the problem. And again, I think the United States does a fantastic job at doing this. We need to work really hard to make sure others, maybe less responsible actors, don't add to the problem.
Well, I'd like to work with you on this challenge, should you be confirmed, as I believe you will be. So clearly you're conversant in it, and it sounds like you'll be prioritizing this. Ms. Trusty, the FCC's International Bureau Telecom and Analysis Division, TAD, issues licenses to own and operate submarine cables and associated landing stations in the United States. Commercial undersea telecom cables carry approximately 99% of transoceanic digital communication, serving as a physical backbone for our internet. Since 2022, Russia has stepped up its attacks on this infrastructure. In 2023, Yiping 3, a Chinese tanker that had previously departed a Russian port, cut 2 Baltic Sea cables. You know, incidents like this, we're reading about them on a regular basis these days. Ms. Trusty, what steps is the FCC's TAD office taking to protect undersea cable infrastructure and the sensitive data and information transmitted across undersea cables every day?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I think this is such an important issue. I focused a lot on it during my time on the Armed Services Committee. This is such an important part of our critical infrastructure, and I think we need to do more to secure it. As you mentioned, the FCC works closely with Team Telecom to review and approve undersea cable applications. I think we can promote more transparency in our foreign ownership in these undersea cables so we have a better sense of what the risks might be. I also think we should try to promote more U.S.-led undersea cable projects so that we can eliminate the risks entirely. In addition to that, I think exploring the diversification of undersea cable routes to ensure that there's no single point of failure to the extent an undersea cable is disrupted. But I think as a protective measure, we should work on strengthening our disaster recovery and emergency response plans, given that some of these cables are so vulnerable to exploitation. But if I'm confirmed, Senator, this would be a priority of mine.
My office will follow up with you on some of your answers for further elaboration, but I do get the sense you're very much dialed into this. I'll just make one last comment, knowing that we have colleagues waiting. Setting standards, Ms. Trusty, at the FCC through international governing bodies is increasingly important. I think we have been outflanked over the years by the Chinese in particular, but also by others, and we need to develop a unified position here at the federal level between the FCC and state and NTIA and various other entities so that we can prioritize this moving forward. So we'll follow up with a question for the record about that as well. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As ranking member of the Aviation and Space Subcommittee, I am looking forward to getting a bipartisan NASA reauthorization done to make sure that NASA is able to execute its mission with a consistent vision and congressional support, free of undue influence from any temporary government employees. According to the Global Counter Space Capabilities Report published this month, the PRC is rapidly advancing a broad spectrum of counter space capabilities as part of a sustained push to secure military power in orbit and expand their presence in space. The PRC has also started building its second satellite internet constellation in lower Earth orbit and has committed to continued human presence in LEO at its Tiangong space station. More than ever, NASA's missions need to be consistent and laser-focused and avoid major subversions of mission priorities and diversion of funds, not only for our global space leadership, but also for national security. I'm going to, Mr. Isaacman, ask you a couple of yes-no questions, but first I just want to say that a sustained human presence in low Earth orbit is crucial for advancing scientific research, testing technologies for future deep space missions, and fostering a thriving economy and global leadership, as LEO serves as a unique environment for research, development, and training due to its microgravity environment. By supporting extended human operations in LEO, NASA can test exploration systems, conduct human research, and maintain operational expertise, vitals for missions on the Moon and to Mars. These are not things that can be done by machine alone, and a gap in our human presence in LEO will likely result in ceding our leadership to the PRC. Mr. Isaacman, do you support maintaining continuous human presence in low Earth orbit?
I do, Senator. I think if reusability has given us anything, it's a very affordable path to send American astronauts to and from low Earth orbit.
Thank you. Elon Musk has suggested that the International Space Station's strategic value has run its course and should be deorbited as soon as possible to focus on a mission to Mars. For the last 20, and that's a quote, he said, as soon as possible. For the last 26 years, the strategic value of the International Space Station has been invaluable, serving as a beacon of the United States global leadership and a symbol of what we can accomplish through international cooperation. Funnily enough, although I don't think it's very funny at all, SpaceX has been awarded the contract to deorbit the International Space Station. Mr. Isaacman, do you believe there's still utility in maintaining a U.S. presence on the ISS at least through 2030 as currently planned?
Senator, as I mentioned in my prepared remarks, I think we need to use up every bit of life that's remaining on the International Space Station so we can crack the code on the space economy and better hand off those responsibilities to commercial industry. I am familiar with Mr. Musk's remarks in that. I do think he is a very accomplished entrepreneur. I would like to understand his rationale behind that, just as I think, Administrator Webb would want to hear from all of the commercial contract leaders from the 1960s during the space race.
But you don't think that we should deorbit the ISS now?
I do not think we should deorbit it now. I think we need to make the most use of the space station while we have it and figure out what we can accomplish in the unique environment of microgravity and figure out the space economy for commercial LEO.
Thank you. The Artemis program is critical in our effort to return to the Moon, and returning to the Moon is seen as a stepping stone for broader human exploration and critical for scientific discovery, advancing technology, and as a necessary preparation for eventually progressing to human mission to Mars. I know a few of my colleagues already today have tried to get a specific answer out of you, but you have avoided directly answering them today. So I ask again, Mr. Isaacman, do you support maintaining NASA long-term mission to maintaining maintaining NASA's long-term mission to maintain a human activity on the moon?
Senator, I'm sorry if I'm not sounding clear on this. I think it's imperative that we do both. I think that's what NASA was created to do. I would love nothing more than to see this crew get around the moon, for us to land on the moon, figure out its scientific, economic, national security value, while we were also charting a course in line with President Trump's vision for American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on Mars.
So you think we can do both simultaneously?
I mean, we do multiple flagship scientific missions at NASA. We maintain a presence in LEO, where we're undertaking dozens of scientific experiments at once. I think we can, ma'am.
You think we can maintain a mission, a presence on the moon and a mission to Mars simultaneously?
I think we can do the moon and Mars and beyond.
Okay. You know, whatever we can do to support the space program, I'm on board. I just have one final question I'm asking all the Trump nominees. If given an illegal or unconstitutional order by President Trump or your superiors, would you oppose it?
I don't think President Trump would give an illegal order, but I would follow the law, ma'am.
And you would oppose if he were?
I don't believe the president would give me an illegal order, ma'am.
Okay, that's fine. But if given an illegal or unconstitutional order, will you oppose it?
I will always follow the law, ma'am.
So is that a yes? You will oppose the illegal order if given one by either the president or your superiors?
Senator, I will always follow the law.
I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Moreno.
I'll start with you, Mrs. Trusty. Thank you so much for taking the time in my office. We did not know each other before meeting with you. Your parents are beaming with pride, which I love to see, with good reason. You're somebody who has an incredibly great temperament, incredible intellect, and I can't think of somebody more qualified to do your job, honestly. The one question I have for you is, there's a scourge of robocalls that creates enormous amounts of scammers. Seniors are getting built of their life savings. How would you use advanced technologies to put an end to this?
Thank you, Senator. I really appreciate this question because you're right. I worry about the susceptibility of our youth and seniors to robocall scams, and I really worry about how illegal robocallers, as we just discussed, are leveraging artificial intelligence to get around call authentication measures. So I think generally the FCC could benefit from stronger enforcement authorities and penalties to go after illegal robocallers. I also think the FCC can continue its work in working with international counterparts as well as states' attorneys generals to go after these fraudsters. But I think we need to discuss more proactive call blocking measures so that these calls never reach the end user. So again, I think artificial intelligence is the key here.
Well, thank you, and I can't wait to have you in that agency taking care of it, and I'm sure you will. And again, thank you for serving this country.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Isaacman, I'm sure with your deep intellect that you know that the Aircraft Engine Research Laboratory in Cleveland, Ohio, was created 17 years before NASA was created. And there's a sign when you drive into the center that says, "For the benefit of all." What does that mean to you?
Well, Senator, I do believe that NASA's mission is to undertake the near impossible, to solve the most demanding, complex engineering challenges, to bring commercial industry can follow, and to bring the rest of the world along the way.
And that's something that I'm sure you have a passion, a deep passion to make sure that we are always the leaders. Is that correct?
100%, Senator.
And just for the record, could you give me a sense of the scale of difficulty it was for you as a kid, if I can say that, as a teenager, to create a company that would become as successful as yours? Give me the scale of difficulty and kind of give me the one example of like a deep challenge you faced making that happen that you thought maybe was impossible.
Senator, there was certainly a lot of ups and downs over the last 26 years. I'd say probably some of the earliest challenges, although, I mean, as a company that went through the .com, the Great Recession, the pandemic, we certainly had our fair share of obstacles along the way. Probably some of the hardest was the earliest days, Senator, where we tried to grow through our own cash flows, which is always a challenge. And I was 16 years old, so I had to make sure I hid myself from any trade shows or in-person meetings. Occasionally, someone would show up at the house for a meeting, and my father fortunately took that for me.
It's always hard to meet underachievers. So congratulations on that. How will you use that skill set at a complex organization like NASA?
Senator, NASA is an extraordinary agency, and they are the most accomplished, well-respected space agency in the world. I want to do whatever I can and work alongside the best and brightest to continue that. I do suspect there are some things that I've learned through running two successful businesses over the last more than 2 decades that I think I can help bring to the agency. I would love to roll up my sleeves, figure out what are the challenges we have from a program management perspective that are causing everything to take longer than it should and cost more than it should. I'd like to instill a very strong mission-first culture at the agency that if we can execute on our mission and get to the moon, get to Mars, and all the other things, the inspiration, the STEM education will all take care of itself. A culture of ownership and accountability. That when we make mistakes, we own them, we fix them, and we get back to delivering on their important objectives.
Well, thank you for that. And I have one last question. Ms. Trusty, 100% unequivocal support from me. Hope to see my Democrat colleagues join us and see if we can get as many votes for you as humanly possible. But for Mr. Isaacman, I have one question. It does hinge, for me, the entirety of whether I can support your nomination or not. Who is the most important character in the movie Armageddon?
Clearly, Bruce Willis for the important self-sacrifice for all mankind, sir.
All right. Let the record show he did not say Dan Truman, which makes me wonder of his judgment, but I will still reserve my vote for you.
Thank you, Senator Moreno. I would note that when you were describing the motto for the benefit of all in the facility in Ohio, I thought you were going to reference the phrase "to serve man," the classic Twilight Zone episode that ends with, "It's a cookbook! It's a cookbook!" Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Trusty, congratulations on your nomination. As you know, I authored the E-Rate, E for Education program in the House of Representatives as part of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, because I believe then and I believe now that access to education shouldn't depend on your zip code. Thanks to the E-Rate, thousands of schools in the United States now have high-speed internet access. That's millions of students who can research, learn, and grow with the tools they need to succeed in the 21st century economy. Do you agree that the E-Rate program has been a success?
Senator, thank you. Yes, I agree that E-Rate has been an important part of making sure students are connected across the country.
Student education has changed a lot since I created the E-Rate program nearly 30 years ago. Today, learning often extends outside the schoolhouse, putting many low-income and rural students who lack internet access at home at a serious disadvantage. Do you agree that having access to high-speed broadband at home is important for students and educators in our modern educational environment?
Certainly, Senator, I think having access to broadband at home, at school, everywhere across the country is important.
And do you agree that a predictable funding source for E-Rate is critical for schools and libraries to stay connected?
Yes, Senator, the Communications Act requires a specific, predictable, and sufficient funding source for universal service.
Thank you. Now, let's turn to a different issue. Over the past few months, Chairman Carr has taken a series of steps to attack broadcasters over their news programming. He pressured CBS to release a transcript of an interview with Vice President Harris that supposedly contained evidence of deceptive editing. When the transcript clearly refuted that allegation, Chairman Carr still opened a docket to accept public comments on it. He's taken similarly baseless steps against ABC and NBC, and he opened an investigation into the underwriting practices of public broadcasters without citing any evidence of wrongdoing. Taken together, these actions indicate a chairman intent on weaponizing the FCC's legal authorities for ideological and partisan purposes. Ms. Trusty, I understand you cannot comment on open proceedings, so I will ask generally, do you agree that the FCC should not open or conduct investigations for political purposes?
Yes, Senator, I agree with that.
If asked to vote on an investigation or enforcement matter that violates the First Amendment, will you vote against that matter?
So, Senator, I don't want to speculate on something that hasn't happened yet, but what I can tell you is—
If it's a violation of the First Amendment, will you vote against it?
What I can tell you is I firmly believe in the First Amendment. I believe, and I won't do anything to violate it.
Okay, but that's what I wanted to hear. And I'm glad to hear that you will take that position, and I'm going to be closely monitoring the Commission's work to ensure that it complies with the First Amendment. Thank you. Mr. Isaacman, you have deep personal and financial ties to Elon Musk. You have invested tens of millions of dollars in SpaceX. You have paid millions of dollars to SpaceX for 2 private space flights. Your payments company, Shift4, has an ongoing, quotes, global strategic partnership with Starlink worth millions each year. And according to a recent Wall Street Journal report, Musk personally asked you to lead NASA. Given SpaceX's significant interest before NASA, you can understand why the public would be concerned about conflicts of interest here. So let's try to set a few things straight. I understand that you met with Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago in late 2024. Is that correct?
No, Senator. I was in Mar-a-Lago to be interviewed by the President of the United States.
So you did not meet with Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago?
I went to Mar-a-Lago to be interviewed by the President of the United States.
I didn't ask you that. Did you meet with Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago?
I believe he was one of dozens of people that were around Mar-a-Lago at the time, Senator.
So did you meet with him?
I would not say we had a meeting. We probably had a conversation in passing, Senator.
Okay, during that same trip, then President-elect Trump offered you the NASA administrator job. Is that correct?
At the conclusion of the meeting, Senator, he did.
Thank you. Was Elon Musk in your meeting when Trump offered you the NASA position at Mar-a-Lago?
Senator, I was interviewed by the President of the United States.
Was Elon Musk in the meeting when he offered you the job?
Senator, my meeting was with the President of the United States.
So Elon Musk was not in the meeting, is that what you're saying?
Senator, I was being interviewed and speaking with the President of the United States.
You can just say he was not in the meeting. Was he in the meeting or not in the meeting?
Senator, I'm trying to be as transparent as I can. I was being interviewed by the President of the United States.
It's not a difficult question. Was Elon Musk in the room when the President offered you the job?
Senator, my meeting was with the President of the United States.
I'm assuming that you don't want to answer the question directly because Elon Musk was in the room. I think that's the only conclusion anyone listening to this could reach, unless you want to dispel us of that notion.
Senator, again, I was being interviewed by the President of the United States, and I'd also say I have no...
that's not... I appreciate that. I'm just trying to determine Elon Musk's role in this, and you're not willing to be fully transparent. Have you discussed your plans for NASA with Elon Musk?
I have not.
So those questions obviously raise serious questions. And I want to turn to one more specific question. From monitoring sea level rise to polar ice loss to wildfires, NASA's satellites are the backbone of climate research used by scientists, policymakers, and the public across the globe. NASA's Earth Observing System collects and archives more than 147 terabytes of data each day. This data underpins climate action efforts at every level of the government, and it drives global research collaborations, and it informs life-saving disaster response. It's a public good, yet the Trump administration is seeking to undermine that. A recent investigation found that large swaths of climate data sets, visualizations, and web tools, once publicly accessible, have been altered or taken down. This unprecedented rollback of public information compromises scientific continuity and transparency at a time of accelerating climate threats and extreme weather events. If confirmed, will you commit to fully restoring and maintaining access to data, as well as resisting any political pressure to sideline climate research at NASA?
Senator, I can tell you I am very passionate about the Earth Sciences Division inside of NASA, especially with respect to anything that has impact on human life and the financial repercussions for remediating things such as wildfires, landslides, flooding. Earth Sciences also plays a big role in near-Earth asteroid protection.
Will you make a commitment to restore all of that information so that it's available to the public? It's vital scientific information.
Senator, I have not been made aware of any information that's not being provided. I mean, I'm just not familiar with any of these changes, Senator.
I'm very disappointed in your question. All this information is vital to getting the information into the hands of scientists and ultimately ordinary citizens to protect.
Thank you, Senator Markey.
And I appreciate your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Isaacman, in response to Senator Duckworth, you said multiple times you will follow the law. Under every circumstance, you will follow the law. I appreciate that commitment. I want to go back and revisit the exchange you had with Senator Kim. Because one component of the law, you have said, and I'm glad to hear it, that under your leadership, America will beat China back to the moon. That's important. But the law is clear beyond simply going to the moon. That's part of it, that going to the moon shall be a stepping stone for further exploration of Mars. The ultimate objective is Mars, but going to the moon is critical. The law also specifies explicitly the administrator shall, and when legislation uses the word shall, it denotes a mandatory obligation. The administrator shall establish a program to develop a sustained human presence in cislunar space or on the moon. With respect to Senator Kim, you were reluctant to commit on a sustained human presence on the moon. Could you clarify your view on that to this committee?
Well, Senator, as a space enthusiast, I'd like nothing more, as I've said before, to see a number of lunar outposts and Mars outposts, and for us to even progress farther out into our solar system. If we are in an unlimited budgetary environment, we can maintain an ongoing presence on the lunar surface. I am more than supportive of it. I think it's imperative that we have to get back to the moon first, as quickly as we possibly can, figure out, again, the scientific, economic, national security value to being there, which I am very hopeful that we are going to find in order to support the ongoing presence on the lunar surface, sir.
So the statute is written in the disjunctive. It gives the choice of either the surface of the moon or cislunar orbit. What is your view on the Gateway project?
Senator, that's an area that if I'm confirmed, I would love to roll up my sleeves and get further understand what's working right, what are the opportunities the Gateway presents to us, and where are some of the challenges, because I think the Gateway is a component of many programs that are over budget and behind schedule, sir.
So you're describing Gateway as over budget and behind schedule. I will say there's a long history in NASA of administrations coming in and canceling programs and causing massive delays. Barack Obama did that with a Constellation, and NASA struggled for years as a consequence. As administrator, are you going to cancel the Gateway program?
Senator, I have no intention as of now to say that I would cancel any program. I need to, if I'm confirmed, get in the job and understand where things are at. I want to assure you and this committee that I want to see America win and succeed and lead in space, whether that be the moon, Mars, low Earth orbit, and beyond. I do not want to see us come in second place, and I certainly don't want to see the right-hand side of that poster you put up, sir.
So I want to ask you again, because you've said you'll follow the law, are you committed to a sustained human presence in cislunar space or on the moon? And that is federal statute.
Senator, if that is the law, then I'm committed to it.
Okay. All right, let's talk LEO. The International Space Station is managed at a Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. NASA is planning to retire the ISS by 2030, replacing it with one or more commercially developed space stations funded partially by NASA and partially by outside customers. Unfortunately, both NASA and commercial replacements are behind schedule. Do you agree that we cannot have a gap period between the ISS and its successor when there would be zero human U.S. presence in low Earth orbit?
I do agree, Senator. We cannot cede low Earth orbit to the Chinese.
Now, I would note in the first Trump administration, there were those in the administration pushing to deorbit the International Space Station prematurely. Given that we've invested over $100 billion in the station, I think that would be profoundly foolish to give up on that investment as long as it is safe to continue using it. After the administration floated this idea multiple times, the United States Senate passed legislation that I authored, 100-0. Every Republican and every senator came through committing that we would maintain the International Space Station at least until 2030, as long as it is safe and scientifically feasible. Will you commit to follow the law and not deorbit the space station before 2030?
Senator, I will absolutely commit to follow the law, and I think we need to maximize the return that taxpayers have invested in that orbital laboratory, use every bit of time we have to crack the code on the space economy, and give commercial LEO destinations a fighting chance when they inevitably take over, sir.
Ms. Trusty, it's been 2 years since the FCC lost general auction authority and 3 years since the last meaningful auction of spectrum. The Spectrum Pipeline Act, which I introduced with Leader Thune and with Senator Blackburn last year, would restore the FCC's auction authority and would establish a clear pipeline of mid-band spectrum for commercial use. Ms. Trusty, should Congress restore the FCC's general auction authority with a clear pipeline of mid-band spectrum?
Yes, Senator, and to the extent it accommodates both our economic and national security interests, and I believe it can.
So what would be the benefits of restoring the auction authority with a clear pipeline of mid-band spectrum?
Thank you, Senator. I think there would be tremendous economic benefits, job creation, workforce productivity, the expansion of broadband services across the country. I also think it's foundational to our leadership internationally on global technologies.
As you know, the Department of Defense has been highly resistant to giving up any spectrum. And for a long time, they have given a parade of horribles as to what would occur if any spectrum moved to the commercial sector. I find that parade of horribles highly incredible and the result of bureaucratic intransigence. It's an intransigence that began when General Milley was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and DOD chose a strategy of absolutely resisting and refusing to work on freeing up spectrum. I recently had a classified briefing, of which you're aware, where I asked 2 questions to the senior leadership at DOD and also senior leadership of the Intelligence Committee. The first question I asked was, over 50 countries across the planet have moved substantial portions of the spectrum in question to the commercial sector, and they're being used presently for commercial purposes. Is it DOD's position that our Navy does not operate in the Pacific, that we can only defend Topeka, Kansas, and the rest of the world, our military is unable to defend the United States? You have unique expertise, having worked both on the Commerce Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee. In your opinion, are we able to defend ourselves across the globe, even in areas where other countries have moved significant portions of spectrum to be available for the commercial sector?
Senator, I appreciate this question. So I'll say I'm not privy to all of DOD's spectrum assets and capabilities, but I do think there's an opportunity to move forward on spectrum policy that protects both our national security and advances our economic interests. And I think what that really requires is, like you said, having classified briefings or briefings in the public where multiple stakeholder perspectives are represented to challenge positions on various matters. I think it promotes transparency and it ensures, I think, there's more cohesion on spectrum matters going forward.
The second question that I asked DOD that they had a totally insufficient answer to was, what would be the national security consequences, and I would add the economic security consequences, if America loses the race for 6G and the global telecom architecture is built by Huawei and controlled by the Chinese communists, and every active duty serviceman and woman who has their own cell phone is now communicating over Chinese telecom infrastructure. In your judgment, what would be the economic interest and the national security interest if that occurred, if we lose the race to 6G?
Senator, I hope we could all agree that it would be devastating to our economic and national security interests if we had to be reliant on Chinese technologies.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Glad I made it back. Ms. Trusty, you both.
I did filibuster a little bit for you.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to that virtual multi-channel video programming distribution issue at the FCC. I want to understand whether you think the FCC should re-examine and negotiate with online platforms that carriage of local news content. I'm concerned that these large platforms, because of the way things have evolved with the affiliates kind of leaving the broadcasters to themselves, and yet they could have some ability. Right now, I believe local broadcasting is holding us together in a lot of ways. It's a trusted source of content that people believe in. They believe their local news organization. They think that model probably wouldn't exist if the community didn't believe in the product. And so we don't want to lose that. But as the digital age continues to evolve and these products and services continue to evolve, like YouTube now being a dominant content distributor, then the ability to negotiate directly with them is a big revenue opportunity, if you will. So how do you look at that issue? Do you think that this should be looked at by the FCC and help level the playing field for local journalism?
Senator, I do. So, to your point about localism, I think it's extremely important. Broadcasters provide vital news and information about social and cultural events, educational programming, and information in disasters. And I think it's incumbent upon the FCC to work with Congress to ensure we have a modern regulatory framework that reflects the realities of today's media marketplace, that enables broadcasters to better compete against technology companies for viewers, for ad revenues, for programming, all things that they can generate resources by to reinvest into their news gathering operations and increase the availability of local news.
Okay. And what do you think the best way for I think they opened that case many years ago and then closed, then haven't reopened it, or actually, technically, I'm not sure about that. You probably know the answer. It's probably like in quasi-land where you could just easily reopen it. Is that right?
Well, I think it's still open before the commission. I'm happy to take a look at it if confirmed. I know that it's been a question on your mind for the past couple of FCC nominations hearings, but I think it's an important issue, Senator. I'm happy to take a look at it and ask the questions.
Right, but you think it should be re-looked at? Is that?
I'm certainly happy to take a look at it.
Yeah. Okay. And then I can't even. Okay. I'm sure you believe in the First Amendment. I'm sure you believe in not weaponizing. Making sure that we have a free press. Back to this broadband issue, as we've continued to allocate resources and look to the FCC, what do you think the best thing the FCC could do now to put more clarity behind the shortfall in broadband inequities?
So I think when we talk about broadband inequities, I think about affordability and adoption. And so with respect to affordability, I think we can promote more competition, embrace more technologies. I think when you have more choice in the marketplace, that helps to reduce the cost of the service. I also think we can focus on removing regulatory barriers that might impede broadband deployment or raise the cost of broadband deployment. If those regulatory barriers are out of the way, I also think that can reduce costs for consumers. Of course, we have the Lifeline program as well. So as the committee is looking at potential reforms to USF, perhaps there's an opportunity to make adjustments to better target those services to communities in need. I'd also speak to digital literacy programs. I know that the private industry, public interest groups have programs of that sort to help people understand how to maximize the benefit of this technology in their lives.
But what about the mapping?
Of course.
I mean, I think we might probably even shared with you that Microsoft data that they came up with, which can tell you by household who doesn't have broadband.
Absolutely. I think maps are foundational to closing the digital divide. And we have the Broadband Data Act, but of course there's always room for improvement. So if I'm confirmed, I would welcome the opportunity to work with private sector stakeholders like your own constituents to better improve the maps.
Well, I think it could help us elevate a conversation into what are the choices that we could have if we really understood that people at $40,000 of income probably aren't buying broadband, which means their kids from a school perspective and other things might not be getting the access that we want, and then obviously the impact it has on communities. And then back to the spectrum, I listened to what you said earlier, even though I've been running in and out at various votes, that you believe that the DoD side of this equation needs to be thought through, that your experience here and then your experience there gave you two different viewpoints on this. How do you think the FCC could best help in resolving this issue? How do we, let me say it differently. 10 or 15 years ago, we probably would have said the FCC is the undisputed scientific leader. You know, you would go to your scientist and you would say, this is what they say about interference, right? But now the world's changed, and we have so much more on the technology front. And now we have agencies disputing each other, right? DOD and FAA, or, you know, various things. How do you think you can reassert the FCC's scientific leadership on this issue when so much of the conversation ends up having, you know, downstairs in a secure briefing room?
Sure, I appreciate this question. I think this is probably the heart of the issue, that engineers don't agree on interference metrics, among other things. So this is where I think the FCC NTIA MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, could probably come into play.
The one that they just did? Or you mean a new one?
Maybe a new one that's updated and reflects some of these other considerations. Maybe we have to hire more engineers and technical people to help address this issue, who have experience in both camps as well. So those are potentially some ideas to address this.
And then what about the secure nature of this? I'm pretty sure, Mr. Isaacman, it is interesting you're here together. It's made it harder for all of us because there's ample questions to ask both of you. But you are an intersection of a very big, important, what is not just a communication system, but is a vulnerability for national security if we don't get it right. And so I think Mr. Isaacman can tell you how broad he thinks this is going to go in the future, the constellations, not just the LEOs that he's talking about, but how much more of this communication is going to happen through the satellite system and why we have to have this layer of security. But do you have ideas that you think the FCC could do in listening more to the a framework by which the private sector and agencies could have more conversations about what the future looks like, and thereby, you know, find some more common ground?
So I think this goes back to a conversation we had a little bit earlier about folks having clearances, because much of this information is classified or in a special access program, and it's very sensitive. And so, you know, I know that some people in the industry do have clearances, but to the extent we can bring those folks into the same room with federal agencies to have these robust conversations about what the needs and interests are, what the objectives are, to try to find a common ground, I think that's the most important thing here.
I didn't mean to engage you on this, but Mr. Isaacman, do you understand my point that there's so much yet to still happen here? That how do we get the dialogue towards the advancements that could happen when basically everybody needs a national security clearance, and yet at the same time give people an understanding of where we could come together? Ms. Trusty, you do support the effort, the NTIA's report that DOD and NTIA should look at dynamic spectrum sharing. You do support that?
Yes, I think we should be investing in dynamic spectrum sharing technologies.
Okay. Mr. Isaacman, any thoughts here?
Senator, I wouldn't want to encroach on my nominee's clear command over the spectrum here. I would say, at least through the lens of NASA, I'm excited about what commercial industry is working on in terms of next generation technology. My most recent mission to space, we tested out sending an awful lot of data securely over a laser link, a beam of light. I think that's a great way, at least from NASA's perspective, to not add to the demand problem with respect to the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think this will be one of the big challenges we face is how do we, if we want this leadership position, how do we think ahead? How do we get this conversation with the private sector who's really doing a lot of that thinking, but also get the DOD part of it and then get the dynamic spectrum part of it done correctly? Okay, well, thank you both very much. Mr. Isaacman and Ms. Trusty, I'm going to ask you a final question required of all nominees. If confirmed, do you pledge to work collaboratively with this committee to provide thorough and timely responses to the committee's request and appear before the committee when requested?
Yes, Senator.
I do, Senator.
Thank you. I have letters of support from various organizations for Mr. Isaacman and Ms. Trusty's nomination that I would ask unanimous consent to be inserted into the record. So without objection, so ordered. Senators will have until the close of business Friday, April 11th to submit questions for the record. These nominees will have until the close of business Tuesday, April 15th to respond to these questions. I thank Senator Cruz for allowing me to come back and ask these questions. That concludes our hearing today. The committee stands adjourned.